You're listening to the Gabe Molina Podcast.
Posted your video, I think it was on Instagram or on Facebook, and I said, I want his hair.
All right, well, let's get started, fellas. I'm here with Victor Avila and Gary Brugman. What's been going on, Gary? You've been doing security, right?
I am. I've been doing it for a little over a year now, steadily.
You liking it? Staying busy?
It's good, yeah, it's good. I got a lot of opportunities. The name's getting out there, so
good.
Never thought I'd be doing armed security again. It's great.
That's awesome. And Victor is running for Congress in the 23rd District.
That's right, between San Antonio and El Paso.
Victor, your story is pretty famous. I think that a lot of people know about it. It's a story that if people don't know about it, they really need to hear, because I feel like what happened to you back then is something that could potentially happen here in the future, because we haven't fixed a lot of the problems that I think that we've had for a long time. So if you will, just kind of briefly.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Man,
I appreciate it. And you're right about the story. You know, this is something that happened to me, and a lot of people identify this would happen to me with who I am. But I went through a little bit of an identity crisis, because it's not just who I am, right? I was an agent, and I've done a lot of work on the border all my life. Yeah. But one of the reasons why I'm running for U.S. Congress is because of what happened to me. It's personal at a certain level. And people need to understand the imminent threat that we face because of the border conditions. And you're going to hear from me today. It's not just about the people walking over. It's way, way bigger than that. And I have that understanding. And I want to bring that to give the power and the knowledge back to the people, so they know that they have a guy fighting for them in Congress, because that's where it all goes down. And so, I was, first of all, I'm a retired Special Agent with Homeland Security Investigations under ICE. That's just a fancy name for being a criminal investigator. A lot of people don't even know what we did. It used to be the U.S. Customs Service that merged with INS, the agents, and it became ICE. But there's two divisions of ICE: the Special Agents, the criminal investigators, and the ERO, the Enforcement Removal Operations, which are the guys, the deportations officer, the illegal alien camps and all that, the flights that send the illegals back. I didn't do that. But we work with them all the time, right? So my career started, I worked at all levels of the government: county, state, as a state parole officer, as a federal probation officer here in San Antonio, and then as a special agent, I got assigned back to El Paso. And where do you work? Dope. You get back to the border, and immediately I was assigned to a dope group. And I was having a lot of fun doing that, a lot of undercover work, and just taking down loads and sources and all that good stuff. A lot of fun work. And then I got transferred about 3 years into my career there. I got transferred to the human smuggling, human trafficking group, which I really wasn't really familiar with. As a matter of fact, I really didn't like it. Yeah. And my supervisor said, "You're gonna have to learn this, Victor. You have to learn this part of the job, because now we're merged." And I did, and I actually became a subject matter expert in human trafficking investigations. And I led the task force in El Paso. FBI used to lead it back then, but then FBI was already shifting away from anything that had to do with criminal investigation. FBI was basically terrorism. Yes, they had to still respond to bank robberies, because they have to by statute, but they would help other people in other police departments and counties. But really, their thing was terrorism. So it was a great advantage for me, because I took over the task force. And there was an FBI agent there, and there was
What time period is this?
This is this is 2000. Well, I started in 2003 as an agent, and it was in 2006, 7, maybe 7, that I became in the task force and started working human trafficking investigations, and actively looking for victims of human trafficking, which is very different than human smuggling. I want people to know.
What's the difference?
Huge difference, because what you're seeing right now, the smuggling of people, that's smuggling. And a lot of times, it's one of my pet peeves. Oh, they're trafficking all these people. That's not trafficking. Trafficking is exploitation of the individual. You got to have either force, fraud, or coercion. It has to exist in order for it to be trafficking. What you see right now is smuggling. The illegal alien pays the coyote, in this case now the cartel, an amount to get introduced into the country legally, and that's it. And I'm going to explain to you how that's been shifting from smuggling to trafficking now. But so I did both. I was doing smuggling and trafficking, and Gary's not gonna like this part of the story, but my career. But I did a big case of a corrupt Border Patrol agent in El Paso. I worked a case of a Border Patrol agent and also a CBP inspector. What we used to call them inspectors, OFO, Office of Field Operations, in the ones in blue.
Yeah.
Female inspector was allowing drugs to come into the port of entry. Thousands and thousands of pounds of marijuana, cocaine, and stuff like that. And this Border Patrol agent was allowing illegal aliens to go through his checkpoint and was getting paid $500 a head for each illegal. And he was working with an organization out of Chihuahua, Mexico. And I was very successful in that case because I always consider myself a hardworking agent. And when I speak around the country, I say working agent. And people will call me, what do you mean by working agent? Well, not everybody works. And I was proud to work. Yeah. I wasn't a super agent. I just worked.
Yeah.
And I loved to work. And so because of my due diligence and my work ethic that came from my parents, I like to work. And so I did. This case was very successful. This is a case that we got to do the undercover, the cameras, of all that good stuff that you would see in the movie. And it was awesome. Well, that got my name in the office. And because of that, I got to switch to other groups and start working financial investigations, Bank Secrecy Act, money laundering, bulk cash smuggling, commercial fraud. That's stuff that people have no idea that HSI also does. Anything that touches the border, has a nexus to the United States border, HSI has jurisdiction to investigate it. Counterfeit pharmaceuticals, counterfeit toothpaste, counterfeit T-shirts, clothing. I mean, I did a case where they were bringing supposedly 100% cotton T-shirts that were not 100% cotton. So they come in counterfeit because they're cheap. They have all these other fibers and stuff, and you don't know what fabric it is. You go buy it at the store, and then you start getting a rash, or you start itching. Like, what the heck is that? It's supposed to be 100% cotton, but it's not. So we do a lot of stuff like that.
So, I don't mean to interrupt, but remember when you used to turn on the movie, you put the VHS tape, you say FBI, copyright, trademark. Now it says HSI.
Oh, gotcha.
And it's you're absolutely right. It's the
so there's so many aspects.
So many aspects. I mean, everything. Man, when I worked in Europe, we did cultural artifacts that are stolen from museums and recover them from places that people steal from museums, paintings and stuff like that. So it's really cool. It's broad.
Super interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I worked on a case in Madrid that we were authenticating an original letter from Christopher Columbus that some guy in New York had. And he was trying to extort money out of people. And, I mean, cool stuff like that. Anyway, so I'm doing that, and then there's an opportunity to go work on the Mexican side in Ciudad Juarez at the U.S. consulate. And I put in for a TDY, temporary duty assignment, and I got it, and I started working in Juarez. This is 2008. Okay. Towards the latter part of 2008. It was a 90-day temporary duty where I would drive my G-Ride, my government vehicle, to the port of entry, park it there in the morning, and the guys we had 2 agents in Juarez working at the time. They would pick me up in the morning in an armored car and then work in Juarez all day till 9, 10 o'clock, a lot of hours. And then I'd do it again the next day. And that's when, man, I always worked the cases on the U.S. side, but once I was in Juarez, dang, that's when, talking about opening your eyes and expanding investigations. Plus, we were helping a lot of offices around the country that had, what they call collateral requests to cases that they had in Atlanta, New York, saying, hey, we have this connection to Juarez, possibly the cartel, and we would investigate that for them on the Mexican side. And this is at the time where 2008 in Juarez, if you guys remember, it was the deadliest and most dangerous city in the world.
The mass graves.
350 homicides a month.
Wow.
And it was weird because I grew up there, right? I grew up going to Juarez and all that, and it felt weird because to me it's my home, but it was a lot of death, a lot of violence from the cartel. The mass graves we dug up mass graves where the bodies would come up. The missing women, we had over 300 women were missing, mostly in the latter teenage years to early 20s, females. And really, if you wanted to kill a female at that time, you just kill her and go throw her in the empty lot. They call it a lote bravo. And nobody knew who it was. Was it the cartel? Was it organized crime? Was it the police? Was it the occult? We had all these theories, right, happening. So you can imagine the amount of work that's going on.
I remember when I was younger, there was a few cases there. I'm sure there was more than a few, but there was one in particular where the father was pushing really hard. I guess his daughter had gone into Mexico from Laredo for a concert, and they had women go in for concerts, for shows, and weren't coming back. You know,
right.
And family never saw them again. Never knew where they were. They'd find their cars at impounds, and but there was no sign of the women.
No sign of the missing women. Well, right now, there's over 80,000 people missing in Mexico. Think about that. No trace of them. And we're talking about adults missing because the cartels get rid of them in acid barrels and dissolve them in there. Anyway, so part of that duty was working in Juarez, but then I also got the opportunity to go to Mexico City, to the U.S. Embassy. And that's the first time I had never been to Mexico City. And I loved it, fell in love with it. And because of that, I got to meet the attaché, just another fancy name for the head of the office for all of Mexico, the ICE attaché. And there's an opportunity for you to come in as an ICE rep to work here. And I did. I talked to my wife, and she said, let's go. And so we packed up our stuff. We sold our house, and I got selected. And before you know it, my family and I moved to Mexico City. And you talk about the change of life. Initially I had a different, idea of what Mexico was going to be. You become a diplomat. To give you a diplomatic passport. You're still an agent, but you have no authority in Mexico. You have to do everything through the government.
Now, this is different than what you were doing in Juarez, right?
Kind of the same, but now it's more in official capacity, more full-blown, with diplomatic status, and you have a mission. And our mission was multifaceted. It was you got to train the government of Mexico. You got and a lot of training how to interrogate a suspect, because they do things very differently in Mexico, as you can imagine. I can laugh a little bit because it's way different. Like, I'll give you a quick example. I would never interview two subjects at the same time in the same room. I would separate you.
Sure.
But you and I might take that for granted. But in Mexico, you have the same people at the same. Well, they're gonna say whatever the other says, right? Mm-hmm. So no, you gotta separate this guy and interview this one first, then the other one. Simple things like that. Even how to execute a search warrant, how to execute an arrest warrant. Then bigger training like human trafficking. I was in charge of the global trafficking in persons. And so a lot of my focus was to take down human traffickers that were bringing girls from Mexico into the U.S. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So
at this point, when you get to Mexico City, you've been in Juarez, you're in Mexico City now. Are you feeling that there's still the support there that you had when you worked on this side of the border? There wasn't. To me, when you go over there, it almost feels as though, yes, you've got the embassy and you've got these entities that people have been working there, but now you're in a different area, right? This is a completely different land.
Yes.
Does it feel foreign for what you're used to, or is there
I
still
love
some
that
structure?
question, Gabe, man, and I'm telling you, very few people ask that question. It is very foreign, and you're looking at me. I'm Hispanic. I'm Mexican American, and that's my heritage. But I'm not from Mexico. I wasn't born in Mexico or raised in Mexico. I'm from Texas, and born and raised in Texas. And yes, it is foreign. And I'm going to share later on how that foreign feeling came to me later on. And I'm going to tell you a quick, just because it came into my mind. I had been in Mexico, I think like 18 months without coming to the U.S., or maybe less, maybe about 9-10 months before I came back to the U.S. I was traveling in Central America and Mexico, all throughout the country, embedded, doing all this crazy stuff. The first trip back was to San Antonio for a conference. And let me tell you the feeling that I got. And I still remember, I get chills. When we landed in San Antonio from Mexico City, I kind of went like this.
It's a relief.
A sigh of relief, because the tension of just living in Mexico City and Mexico and the drugs and the corruption and the cartels and all this other, it gets
You're
to
under
you.
constant
And when I remember landing in the United States of America in San Antonio, I was like, man, you're always on edge. You're always in law enforcement, Gary, you know this. Mm-hmm. Yellow. Mm-hmm. Yellow is the colors you go by. Yellow is on your couch, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have no worries. And then you go to different colors, right? Red would be life or death. Well, orange is in between. And in Mexico City, it was orange all the time.
Yeah.
So you never hit the yellow, and it does do something for you and your family. And so I worked the most I ever worked in my life in Mexico, nonstop. Now the support is there, like within the coworkers. We became a family.
Sure.
Yes, I made a lot of contacts with the Mexicans and the national and the police and all that, but it's not the same. And working, doing all this, traveling, a lot of traveling. And I write in the book because my wife is very understanding, and she knew, even before she married me, I was in law enforcement. You know, you miss a lot of birthdays. That's the type of career you have. But Mexico was a very different level, that even my wife was like, hey, what's going on, man? You're not home.
Yeah.
And some months I was home 3 or 4 days out of the month. And even my kids started questioning me like, hey, Dad, what are you doing at home? And doesn't it feel good?
This is my house.
It's my house. It's my couch. I'm watching my TV. And like, well, when are you leaving? Oh, actually, I'm leaving tomorrow. Oh, you know? And that's the way it was. And I didn't like that part of it. And yet, I love my job. It's a weird feeling.
Sure.
I hate neglecting my family, but I love what I was doing.
And your family loves you. So, I mean,
Yes.
there's that support. And I'm sure some of that stress trickles down to them. They may not have the full effect of what you're doing, but that says a lot about their love for you to stick with you, and because it's stressful, you know.
Boy, you said it. You talk about the love, and you read my book. My wife is mentioned there a lot, and my family is mentioned a lot, and it wasn't with the intention of that. It just comes out because they're an intricate part of my life.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, absolutely, that's very true. They're in it. They're in it right in the middle with you, and so. I was very fortunate that my wife was very understanding, but I write a scene in there about right before the shooting, because I carried 3 phones in Mexico City, and at one point she threatened to flush them down the toilet. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and
it sounds like her.
You know, Claudia.
It totally sounds like
and
her.
You know, for my wife to do that, she's like, I had
stress.
about enough. That's about enough. And they call me Trips. They call me Trips in Mexico City because I used to travel a lot. It's hard for me to explain because it was work.
Yeah.
People like, oh, you're traveling, like I'm having a good time. But no. I went to Atlanta, but it was a case. I went to New York, it was a case. I went to Denver, I went to Guatemala, I went to Panama. It's work.
Sure.
You know, and throughout, I did a 1 week embedded with the Mexican government doing a southern border assessment in Mexico to Guatemala and Belize for a week in the jungle. Crazy stuff like that, right?
That's crazy.
And so it just took me away from my family. So in 2011, almost 2 years in the country, 2 years counting the Juarez time, I told my wife, okay, New Year's resolution, I'm not going to travel. And it's almost like I said it on purpose because it happened, the opposite quite happened. Mm-hmm. January of 2011, I'm in Denver, I'm in Panama, and my wife's like, what are you doing? Are you doing this on purpose? I'm not doing it on purpose. You know, it got really stressful at home. And actually I was in Arizona working on a case. I was working on an Afghan smuggling case. Mm-hmm. So people could kind of hear that. Yes, I was working an Afghan smuggling case in 2011 because there's a lot of Afghans and a lot of people from all over the world in Mexico, Bangladesh, Somalians, what we call SIAs, Special Interest Aliens.
How does, I mean, I don't want to divert you because we're going good, but your regular Joe Blow, Gabe Molina hanging out, we don't understand that there's that element in Mexico. To us, it's Mexico, right? You might have some Guatemalans, people from Venezuela, but people from foreign countries that are across the ocean, that doesn't jive with us. We don't understand that portion, you know?
No, and they've been there now, even more so. But they've been there for a while. I used to get access to interview them at the Mexican immigration detention facilities. And I could never get anything out of them because, first of all, they didn't speak the language. I had an interpreter, and they wouldn't say anything. Once in a while, one would say, I'm going to New York, and that's it. And they had one identity down the southern border, another one in Mexico City, and then another one when they got to our northern border. We had no idea what these people were and what their intentions were. Yeah. We're talking about possible terrorism here, right?
Sure.
And so we worked those cases, and I was working that case. And it was actually a really good case, about to close it up. I had just debriefed the source who had embedded in there and got a great information. And I was in Tucson, Arizona. The shooting happened on a Tuesday. This is the Thursday before. And, you know, I turned in the car and I rented my own car. And it's a 4-hour drive to El Paso. So I surprised my parents and I spent that weekend in El Paso, and I visited all my family and my friends, and it was kind of like a going away. It was very surreal, now that I look back on it. So I get back to Mexico City Sunday night, Monday morning, like 1 a.m, and I walk into my apartment about 1 a.m, which is Valentine's Day, February 14th. And I go to the office to work at the embassy, and I had a lot of administrative work to do, all the reports. You remember everything that we do in the field. We gotta write a report,
gotta write it down.
And so I had to do a lot of administrative work, and so that was my whole week. I was going to do that, and my wife had done some special plans for Valentine's dinner, and I said, "Yeah, great, we'll be able to do it." And then around noontime, my coworker at the cubicle says, "Hey, heads up, they're going to send you to Monterey," and it flipped my top, man. I'm like, What the hell are you talking about? I just got here.
Yeah.
I've been gone, man. And he says, well, that's what I heard in the meeting this morning, that they're going to send you to Monterey. So we went to lunch in Mexico City about 2 o'clock, come back at 3, and sure enough, my supervisor calls me over and says, hey, I need you to go to Monterey and take Jaime Zapata, which is, they call him a TD wire because he was there on the temporary duty status. He was coming in from the Laredo office, rotating, doing a big arms trafficking case. And because we were understaffed, we couldn't work the case. So we said, well, just bring the agents and we'll guide them in Mexico, and they could work their own case, and they would rotate 30, 60, 90 days.
That wasn't Fast and Furious.
That wasn't Fast and Furious.
Okay.
That was another one out of Laredo, which is a very good case. They had a wire up and everything. It was a good case. And Jaime had just come in that week before to substitute and relieve one of the other agents.
Is that pretty typical?
Very typical. Well, That's what we were trying to do at that time, because we were so busy that when I got there, it was, 3 agents. By the time I left, maybe 7, and still, DEA had 35. So just to give you a perspective, we were way understaffed. And
you just got to make it work.
You gotta do what you gotta do. I mean, you're talking about multitasking. I used to get thousands of emails. And back then it was, the BlackBerry. It's this device for people who don't know, because BlackBerry's like, what the heck is that? Well, it's a phone that you can type on. And that's what I used to use. And we used to have Nextel radio phones. Remember those? Mm-hmm. And those were awesome because we used to talk to everybody there, bad guys, good guys, everybody. And so I'm at the office. I get called in. I get the assignment. I challenge the assignment because they're telling me you got to go drive. And I said, what are you talking about, drive? There was an alert from the U.S. ambassador prohibiting anybody from driving on that highway. Now, I'm going to say the word highway because that's what it's called, but it's I-35. Think of it.
Right.
It's the toll road from Mexico City up to Texas.
And that instruction came from, you said, from the U.S. ambassador?
That was actually issued a few weeks before. Every U.S. personnel got an email saying, and I have a copy of it, you are prohibited from driving on Highway 57 for personal reasons or business reasons. And if you wanted to, you had to get written permission from the ambassador and the regional security office. And I'm like, no, that hadn't happened. And my bosses didn't get permission. And I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you a little bit of how that comes through the RSO office, the regional security office.
You were moving equipment or something, right?
Well, that's what they said. You're going to go pick up some equipment.
Okay.
And I didn't know what equipment, tracking devices, electronic surveillance equipment for a case, a big money laundering case. We had seized a container with $40 million in cash, which was linked to a big case out of Colombia. And my supervisors in Mexico got all giddy about a case. Oh, we're in it. Because Colombia was getting all the attention for that big seizure. That was the biggest seizure in the history of the U.S. Customs Service, even ICE or before all that. And I think part of that, my supervisors were clouded by that, the glory of the case, right? And I still challenge it. I call the assistant attaché out of Monterey, the ICE assistant attaché, and I said, get him on the phone right there, speak with my supervisor. And we do, and I said, what the hell's going on? Why are we driving? He says, hey, they're having, the whole corridor of that is controlled by Los Zetas cartel, and they're having firefights with the Mexican police and Mexican military. Yeah, I know. That's what we do here in Mexico. We have the intel, right? So he's corroborating all this information. So why are we going on the road? Why aren't we flying it? Why aren't we putting it on a diplomatic pouch, which is a truck that brings our furniture and brings our mail and brings whatever you order on Amazon? Why aren't we putting it on there?
So there were other means to get that.
Easily. But all of that, I was shut down. They said, we've been working on this since December. I was never privy to it. In law enforcement, you got to be briefed. There's a saying in law enforcement, if you're not present for the briefing, you don't get to play. Yeah. Well, I didn't want to play because I know the briefing. They haven't been talking about it. They said, oh, no, we already resolved all this and talked about this, where I wasn't part of the conversation. and the assignment is being thrown at me in the last minute. Now, to get on that road, you needed escorts, either U.S. escorts with other armored vehicles, or the Mexican military or Mexican federal police. At least one vehicle. Mm-hmm. Everywhere I went out of town, when I used to go to places, I had made arrangements for an escort.
And that's just standard.
That's just standard. I mean, because of the crime, right?
Right.
And so that wasn't afforded. Like, no, you need to go tomorrow. And so I made my supervisor go and knock on the door of the deputy attaché, which is the number 2 guy. And we nicknamed him, my friend nicknamed Blue 52, because he looks like Peyton Manning. Blue 52. And very incompetent people. Yeah. Very incompetent people. Not very experienced agents, but, it's like the government. They put people in positions where, because of who they know. And I'll never forget this. And I write it verbatim, and I'll say it to you verbatim. He comes out. My supervisor tells him exactly what I just told you. Mm-hmm. And he says, I'm not aware of any security issues in Mexico.
Wow.
Now, I might have a little bit of a foul mouth, but the whole fucking country of Mexico is a security issue. How dare you say that, right?
Well, even during that time period, as just a regular citizen of the country here, we used to go to Mexico from time to time. We go into Progreso and mess around, whatever. There's a certain time, and it's about the same time period, where we knew just not to go even to the border towns. It just wasn't safe.
Yeah. So I mean, especially with the intel that we have, right? So he says, I need that equipment by close of business day tomorrow. When he went into his office and closed the door, and my supervisor looks at me like, "You're ordered, bro. You're ordered. If I don't follow the orders, I'm curtailed, and they kick me out of the country." So then I call the assistant attaché Monterrey, make arrangements. I meet Jaime Zapata. We exchange numbers. I told him, come to my apartment because I live north of the city, and be there at 6:30 in the morning, and we'll take off.
Had you met him before?
No, that's the first time I met him. And he had comms, and I had a box full of, throw down phones. So I had one, so we exchanged the code and the secure code, and we could communicate with each other. And I said, take a cab, or one of the other agents said, no, I'll take him where you live, Victor, because I know where you live. Because we live north of the city, and you can imagine the traffic. I said, I'm not going to come down and pick you up at the hotel. So you come up, and then we leave from there. And sure enough, next morning, I'm leaving a lot of details because Valentine's Day for me was a very special day that day. First, it was screwed up because my wife, I had to stay now, and I was going to work late. And I told her what was going on. She was very upset that I was going out of town when I had just gotten in that day. And so she called in. It was a sushi restaurant that we were going to have, and she called everything at the restaurant to get delivered to the house. And then my kids, and I get a little emotional because I'll never forget it, but they acted like they were the waiters. They were the waiting staff. So when I got home, they were dressed like the servers, and they had the napkin and all that. And Mr. Avila come in, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And they sat me down, and we had a really nice Valentine's Day. And I in the morning, Jaime shows up. I kissed my son. He was still asleep. My daughter woke up, and she's like, why are you going out of town again? And I lied to her. I said, I'm not going out of town.
How old was she at the time?
She was 8.
Wow, they were young.
They were young. And she said, why are you going out of town? And I said, no, I'm not going out of town. He says, you're not wearing a suit. Because I always wear a suit to the embassy, and I wasn't wearing a suit. I was in a polo shirt and jeans.
Man, kids are smart.
And they're smart. And I said, no. It's because I'm going to be right back. I'll be back today. And that's what I would have left my daughter with.
Was it a day trip?
Well, it was going to be a hard day trip, but it was going to be a day trip. It was going to be a long one. But we expected to be back probably, it was probably around another like a 12-hour trip.
Okay.
Or probably more. I don't know.
And then 12 hours each way?
No. It's 11 hours one way, but they drove a little bit, and then they met us. So anyway, we're driving. Jaime Zapata and I hit it off. And it's like I've known him all my life. I mean, he's from the border town. He's originally from Brownsville, working in Laredo. And he's a little bit younger than me, and he wants to go to Mexico City and serve. And we're talking about him speaking a little bit better Spanish. He told me all his life about his girlfriend, fiance. It was not a silent moment in that Suburban, talking about everything. I mean, he shared a lot of personal stuff. I knew about him being he loved to barbecue, a fisherman, all that good stuff. And he got a call during the drive saying that he had one of his lookouts was a hit. at the bridge, and I knew he was a working agent. You know, I knew, oh, this guy's like me. And he was very proud when he called and they called him from sector, and he says, I can't respond because I'm in Mexico on detail. And he was, I remember him being like, yeah, it sounded good, right? I'm on detail in Mexico. Oh, okay, we'll call somebody else on duty over there. But anyway, we're talking, and we get to the exchange. It's actually kilometer marker 100. And we exchange the equipment, and we meet the other two agents at like 11:30 in the morning. And it's a lot. I mean, boxes. We fill in the back of the Suburban. Third row seats down, even the second row seats down to fit all these boxes. And we switch them over. They have the same Suburban that I have, except there's a cream-colored one. Mine's blue. Put it over, switch it over. There's a restaurant right there. And I told Jaime, you want to eat something? He says, no. The lady, it was 11:30, so, you know, lunch in Mexico is till 2. Mm-hmm. But the lady says, I'll make you a taco or a burrito. He says, no, I want to eat at the Subway that we had passed. And I said, okay. We'll eat at the Subway and use the restroom, and then, all right, see ya. So we head back. Now we're heading back south, and I'm still driving. We get to the Subway. We eat a great lunch, and I throw him the keys afterwards. I said, all right, it's your turn to drive. To get used to the armored vehicle, he had never driven one before.
Oh, I got you.
And the Suburban weighs almost 6 tons.
Wow.
It's very. If you never driven one, it takes you a little bit to get used to it. And there was no training back then. They just, here you go.
On the job, huh?
Now, it's on the job training. Now there's official training on how to drive an armored vehicle, how to shoot from an armored vehicle. And I said, well, get used to it on the open road. It's the best place. You know, there's not that much traffic. And keep it between 70, 72 miles an hour. And here we go. And so he's driving, and I'm getting work done on the BlackBerry. I had a conference, a human trafficking conference setting up in Ciudad Juarez. We're looking for a fugitive. Oh, this stuff is going on. I'm on the phone. And I call my supervisor and give him the location where we're at. We're going to be coming into Mexico City late, like around past 7 o'clock, which is rush hour in Mexico. Rush hour is between 7 and 9 p.m. And I told Jaime, hey, when we get into the city, you'll pull over and I'll take it from there, because I'm not going to make you drive through this nightmare of traffic. All right. Within, Jaime was only driving maybe 20 minutes. No more than 30 minutes, 20, 25 minutes, when two SUVs passed us at a high rate of speed. And he's the one that gave me the heads up on one of the SUVs, because there was a long gun sticking in the middle of the seat. And he said, hey, heads up. And I look up, and I said, what the heck? Yeah, you could see the occupied by several occupants, and then you see the rifle. And it's gone.
Now let me ask you this. I was watching some other interviews you'd done, and you said at some point you had driven by, and I guess maybe there was a federal police officer on the side of the road.
That
was before you picked up the package?
So that's before. So that's when we were driving to the Subway, and it was such an eerie and I was scared, because we're driving. So think of yourself driving on I-35 or on one of these roads, and you see a trooper outside of his vehicle in uniform with an M4 just scanning traffic. Well, that's weird in any country.
Sure.
Right? Like, what is he doing? Especially in Mexico. I've been through checkpoints, legal, illegal, military, police, you name it, cartels, and you learn how to navigate when you get there, identify yourself, approach, all that stuff. This guy was just by himself in the median, going like this. And not just me, but the other traffic were slowing down. Like, what the hell is this guy doing? And we slow down, and we're passing by, and he's like this, watching us. I'm watching him, he's watching us. And I told Jaime, we passed him, I'm looking at the mirror, and he's just there. And I told Jaime, hey, are you all right, man? He says, yeah. I told him, man, I'm scared. Are you scared? And he says, yeah. I got that, you get a feeling. And I never gotten that feeling in Mexico. Yeah. That day I got it, that right there when I saw it, because I couldn't identify.
Y'all weren't armed, were you?
So I had 2 guns. I had 2 guns in my backpack, and they were caught. I had put them in the back of the floorboard. And when we lowered the seats, the backpack was underneath. Okay. But I didn't have them on my body. But yeah, I was issued 2 guns, and a Glock 19 and a SIG 229, a 40 cal. And I told Jaime, hey, the guns are right here. And this is the way I told him that this shit hits the fan. And I said, okay. So he knew they were there. And now we see these guys, and now we see the 2 SUVs. And then before you know it, they slowed down to like 25 miles an hour, and we were up on them. And they started immediately blocking us to the side of the road, doing what we call a rolling roadblock. The SUV in front stops, and the SUV at the same time side pushes to the side. And so it stop, push, which is what we train to do at the academy. And the first time the initial Jaime tries to evade him, and then they regroup and they do it again more aggressively. And the guys next to Jaime on his driver's side door lower the windows and bring out AK-47s. And they're yelling in Spanish to stop, pull over, stop, pull over. They're literally almost hitting mirror to mirror, going like this, right? And Jaime's avoiding the collision and then trying to avoid the collision in the front till we come to a complete stop in this shoulder area on the right side of the highway. And boom, about 8 of them pop out. And long guns, except the one that came to Jaime's driver's door, he had a handgun on him. And he comes over and opens the door. He was going to yank it, and he actually opened the door. And everybody was surprised. He was surprised. Jaime, I was surprised, like, why did the door open? Because when we placed the vehicle in park, the 4 doors unlocked. That's the way the Suburban was programmed.
Dude, that gives me goosebumps.
I know.
Just thinking about it.
I've heard, it's funny because when I've listened to some of the interviews you've done and some of the stories, I often thought that my truck does it. I put it in park, everything unlocks, and that bothers me. So I didn't understand how that would work because in my mind I was like, well, these are different vehicles. Maybe they're equipped differently or they're set up differently to where it doesn't do that. But when you put it in park, it did unlock. It did
that. Not anymore. They were all reprogrammed afterward, obviously. And so, but Jaime immediately shut it. So the Suburban has a big industrial handle. It doesn't have your regular door handles because the doors are so heavy.
Sure.
And so it swung open, swung right back shut. It wasn't open for a second. Boom, boom. And we hit the lock buttons. Well, when we are hitting the lock buttons, the window buttons are next to the lock buttons.
Gotcha.
And my window inadvertently was lowered a couple of inches, just like this, but nobody noticed. And this guy was like the head of the little group. They call him an estaca. And that's the first, I had never heard that word until we were at trial. Estaca. Estaca is like the group of hitmen, right? Mm-hmm. He's like the leader. And
the team lead.
The team leader, really. And he's the one really commanding. All the other guys, they're yelling too and pointing the guns. We have our hands up like this and the windshield literally like this. And
so at this point, do you think that as long as I convey to them who we are,
yes,
this is going to end?
Yes. So I'm yelling in Spanish. We're Americans. We're not who you think we are. We're U.S. Embassy employees. This is a diplomatic vehicle. We're U.S. diplomats. We're Americans, yelling it over and over. And this guy's like, open the effing door, in Spanish. And yelling. And then before you know it, he pops off a few rounds with his handgun towards Jaime's door and in the tire area. And I told Jaime, did he just shoot? Like it was mind-boggling, bro.
Right.
To hear that. I guess you go into the denial phase. Yeah. I went through all these phases really fast, right? Denial very fast. Right there, it hit me like I didn't want to believe that he actually had shot at it, and he did. And I told him, let me show you my diplomatic passport. Yelling over and over and over. And before you know it, 2 of them came around, and before they were here, and they introduced a handgun and a barrel of an AK-47 in the door. They squeezed in the barrels.
That was through that slit in the window.
To that little, and I immediately got the button and raised the window, and it caught the barrels of the both guns. And I remember one of the Zeta members was like wiggling the AK, wiggling, and this guy with a handgun, and without notice, they opened fire into the cabin, and they struck Agent Zapata multiple times on the side, and I remember I'm hit. I'm shot. And I told him, go. And I got shot once in the chest.
So he's still conscious right now?
Yeah, he's conscious. I get shot once in the chest, twice in my leg. I don't know. I have no idea that I'm shot. And
so was Jaime's window open too?
No, Jaime's window was not open. And then they pulled the guns out. And before that, I grabbed the handgun. Like I was like, I don't know, I was trying to take it away. I don't know. I just figured I'd just grab it. I just wanted him to stop shooting. And then this whole area, I had a little bit of scar here, but this whole area of my skin was peeled out because it was really hot.
The gun being hot, sure.
Yeah, really hot. And then they pulled him out, and I raised the window, and they just boom. They were shooting. They shot over 100 rounds at it. And I tell Jaime, go. And I actually put the Suburban in gear, and I pushed his right leg on the gas, and boom, we crashed the vehicle in front of us trying to get back on the road. But at that time, Jaime started to become unresponsive. And the Suburban crashed, went on the highway, and just rolled into the median, and I grabbed the steering wheel to try to put the Suburban back, and they were this whole time they're shooting at it, right? And did this disabled, the tires are flat, and the vehicle's disabled at that point. And Jaime's shot with an AK-47 round in his left leg, which is where he was bleeding profusely, and he's yelling a lot of stuff, and I'm telling him, I'm calling for help. One of the SUVs takes off. I have very limited vision because there's armored windows, the glass
starting to shatter.
It shatters very weird. You can't see from the inside out. The outside you'll see the globes of the white where they shot, but the inside it shatters. You can't see.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking in between the cracks in the front windshield, and I see one of the SUVs take off, and then the second one takes off, but then it does a U-turn, comes and parks right in front of the Suburban, and two of the shooters come out and they look at me with AKs and just start shooting, trying to get. And you usually go online and see pictures. You'll see the two globes of the white where they're trying to penetrate the glass. And I kind of just freeze there for a second, and then they run into their SUV and they take off. And I'm attending to Jaime. I called the U.S. Embassy. People could hear that call online about, I
looked it up.
Yeah.
And it's a heavy phone call.
It's a heavy. It's a distress call for sure.
Now, when they got the call, who's listening?
So the call goes to, I actually called the main switchboard at the U.S. Embassy. Like if you were a tourist, that's what you would call, right? I'd never call that number, but that's my Nextel my Nextel phone didn't work. So I slammed that in the floorboard and I picked up my BlackBerry, and that's I don't know, embassy. Boom, and that's where you hear the recorded call. He transfers the operator transfers the call to the regional security office, the RSO, which my wife happens to be working at that office as a background investigator. The receptionist that answers the phone is temporary, and when she answers RSO, I'm yelling at her. Right? She drops the phone, literally doesn't hang it up, just drops it there, runs down the hallway, and she says, "There's an Agent Avila on the phone has been shot." So my wife is like 5 feet away.
Really?
And she
Again,
comes
that
out.
gives me goosebumps, bro.
Jeez. I said, "What you say? Agent Avila? There's an Agent Avila on the phone. He said he's been shot." My wife almost faints. She actually started throwing up. That's what Claudia started getting. She got sick. And then one of my friends, a diplomatic security special agent, gets on the phone, and I'm like, "Ah!" And he's like, "Who's this?" And I go, "It's me, fucking Eddie, man. It's me." My friend Eddie, man, and where are you? Well, I'm I don't know, in the middle of the road, and we were in a stretch where there's nothing.
You're still on 57.
We're still on 57, right there. We're past the state of San Luis Potosí. There's the town of María de Quién sabe qué, but I didn't know there's a little town there, but there's nothing.
How long from the rolling stop to this point where you're making a phone call? How much time goes by, approximately? Do you think?
About
a year.
It felt like it.
A year.
Gary. It felt like it. It's about 2 minutes, which is a lot.
Is this a heavily traveled
highway?
Yeah.
This is people are.
So you see people.
People are driving.
Okay.
Yeah. People. Think of it as so people are slowing down.
Yeah.
There was witnesses, obviously, that saw it. They never came forward.
Is that part of maybe what contributed to those guys actually leaving and not stay until they could get in the car?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, it's a public area, right? And I don't. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. That they just said, or they thought we were dead. I think they thought we were dead. And I'll tell you why they send somebody else to verify that. But I'm attending to Jaime. I'm on the phone. They could hear me yelling at Jaime. At one point, I was moving him pretty aggressively to keep him awake, and then another friend and all these people start running to the phone, including ICE agents. One of my friend who used to be a paramedic, and he's the first one to tell me, "Are you shot?" So I had a lot of glass and a lot of
particles.
Yes,
Shards.
Shrapnel.
How much time does that take for them to get to you?
Oh no, this is just on the phone still.
Oh, this is on the phone.
This is on the phone.
Okay,
And he's on the phone telling me to check myself because I was bleeding a lot. I had Jaime's blood. I had my blood.
Got you.
And I had a lot of cuts around my face, and I was like, just kind of wiping it. And then he says, "I need you to physically check your head, like take your hand," and I did. And that's when I saw my chest wound right here. And oh shit! And I was bleeding down my pants like this. And I said, "Yeah, I'm hit here." And he said, "Where else?" And I look at my leg. and my leg's like a fucking balloon.
Yeah.
Sorry. and I'm like, and I was like, I didn't even know I was shot a third time in the lower. That one they found at the hospital. And he's like, take off your belt. And I did a tourniquet with my belt on my leg. And then a lot of people on the phone were jumping on the phone. And I got on the phone and I was like hanging up, answering red, green on that BlackBerry. And I called. The only person in Mexico that I trusted was a guy of our vetted team. In Mexico, we had a vetted unit that we vetted that worked with us, right? And I called him, and he answered the phone. And the thing, I also called him at his office phone, what I would never do.
And who was he?
He was the head of our vetted team.
Okay.
Yeah. I never say his name, but
Sure.
for protection. But we were very good friends. I worked with him on a daily basis, and I would always kid around. I said, "Hey, I'll call you if it ever hits the fan anywhere in the city, if we ever had a problem or whatever." He says, "Yeah, you ever call me? You can call me if there's ever an issue." Well, there was. I called the office. That there's a recorded call out there that I've never been able to get. I heard it one time, partial, and it's me in Spanish. And I'm not proud of the call, and I hope one day to get it. But it was recorded because believe it or not, Mexico, it was a phone with a little red light on it. It was like the emergency phone. That's the one that I called. Mm. But he also didn't recognize my voice, like, and it's all Spanish, right? Sure. And I have a potty mouth, and I'm saying a lot of. I heard the call partial one time, and I'm like, until finally he's like, Victor, like, yeah, it's me, and he was able to deploy a helicopter from Mexico City. And then now you start dealing with there's a thing called corruption in Mexico. Sure. You just can't call anybody.
Yeah.
So now he has to call trusted people. And I told him, whoever you send, you better send who you send, and I'm going to verify that person, whoever shows up. Yeah. So this whole time on the phone, Jaime is unconscious. All of a sudden, this ambulance comes up. It's a vehicle like you would recognize it an ambulance. It doesn't say ambulance. It's not painted as an ambulance, but it's an ambulance.
Sure.
Pulls over to the side on the far right side of the Highway 57. This guy, like a paramedic, comes over. I already had my guns, by the way. I pulled them out. And yes, I had the Glock in my hand. Just whoever's a Glock person. And I put my SIG in my waistband, and I was flanking him. I was like this. But he couldn't see me, and he's like, open the door. I said, yeah, open it. Because the door was jammed. My door was jammed with the crash. And I said, open it in Spanish. And I'm here to help you. I said, yeah, open it. And I'm here, open the door, help me open it. I said, no, you open it. And he just gave up. He didn't even really try and ran back and left. Well, I didn't know this. I didn't know who that guy was. I didn't trust him. But not until the trial in 2017 that I learned that he was a Zetas cartel member.
Really?
That's their own ambulance. So when they get injured or they go verify to make sure everybody's dead.
They have their own ambulance?
Yeah. They have their own ambulance. Chasing. When they have these firefights, they have their first aid right there.
That
following them.
Crazy.
Highly organized.
So he was going back to finish the job.
He was going to go back to, he's going to finish me, right?
And then Victor, I can't even fathom. I can't even put my mind around, and I'm glad that I can't, what you must be experiencing at that exact moment. You've got your partner next to you who's unconscious now. You're bleeding. You're in the middle of the highway. You can't even see your surroundings because of the glass. I mean, when you talk about being backed in a corner, I mean, you're just ready to bite at anything, And so had that guy opened the door,
I wouldn't be here telling you this story.
You wouldn't be here. And there's so much that it's like there's luck, and then there's the grace of God.
Oh, right. I'm here by the ladder, by the grace of God.
Man.
One person, once I started talking about it publicly, one person one time asked me kind of bluntly at a place where, hey, why didn't you die? And it kind of took me aback, and it bothered me. Why didn't I die? Because I did have survivor's guilt for a long time. Why didn't I die? And a lot of people online, I would go into the online. They told me, don't get online. Don't look at the comments because people are evil. And people would put on there like, well, why did his partner die and you didn't die? Why are you part of the cartel? Are you part of stupid stuff like that, right? Ridiculous. But the answer was very clear because God wanted it that way.
Yeah.
That's the way he wanted it. And he left me here for a reason. I don't know what that reason is. So then you start thinking, what's the reason? Well, maybe it was just to see my kids.
Yeah.
Grow up. Maybe just to help my wife raise my kids. Maybe it's what I'm doing now. Maybe it's a purpose, and I have a purpose, and I believe I do have a purpose. And if God's gonna say, I left Victor here because he's gonna do something good for the community.
Yeah.
Maybe he needed Jaime up there.
Maybe he needed Jaime there.
That's true,
He
too.
definitely needed Jaime up there, and so.
So you find out later on that this guy was a EMT or whatever.
Right.
So it's crazy because we always hear how structured they are, but I had no clue it was to that level. That they actually
the
had.
vehicles that we're driving were checked out. They have fleet cards, gas cards, like a company.
Really?
Yeah, they checked out the weapons. They checked out the fleet cards. Like you're driving Suburban A today, or Suburban 123.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because that's crazy.
It's sophisticated.
It's extremely
It really is. It's a
sophisticated.
corporation, and I tell people now. I compare them. I said compare the cartels to Amazon, $1 billion industry, highly organized, distribution centers all over the world. Except they deal in murder, extortion, drugs, and human trafficking and all that. But it's still the same thing. They're highly organized. Intel, better than sometimes than we have it. And so,
but also the Zetas, when I was an agent in Eagle Pass, they were a government agency.
Yeah.
They were a Grupo Zeta, and so when they got bought by the cartel, they brought that discipline to the cartel.
I'm ignorant, right? And I
We know.
I think a lot of Gary knows, and I think a lot of people are similar, where we don't understand how sophisticated it is. We see the bloodshed, we see the violence, we see you hear about the heads in the streets and people hanging from bridges, and when you see that, you go, animals, and so. It's almost, as you're telling me this, and I'm hearing about how sophisticated it is, it's even more scary than what I thought it was before we started this conversation.
and I'll use another word, evil,
Yeah.
because that's what I saw that day, evil. And by the way, these guys were not in military attire. They were not in black fatigues and had wearing masks. They were clean cut, very short, clean, very fit soldiers. Most of them soldiers. Most of them were ex-military. And very disciplined. You could see the discipline in them, but you could also see the evil in them. Mm-hmm. Human life to them is nothing. It's like this table. They'll destroy it, chop it up, whatever. There's no feeling for them. If you take a saw right now to this table, you're not going to feel anything. That's the way they cut through a human body. Yeah. It's a piece of wood for them. It's a piece of a product.
An inanimate object.
Inanimate object. And so finally, the cavalry comes. I remember asking for the main police guy. I made him take out his badge from his wallet. He's like, "What?" I said, "You're not gonna open the door." And he's like, showing me his wallet through the little glass and the badge. I said, "I don't want to see the badge. I want to see your creds." He pulls those creds and the name matches. And all right. And they pry open the door. Military also showed up. The helicopter landed right there.
So when they opened the door, were you still on guard?
No. So what I did is when they showed up, I put my guns away. I holstered them, and I threw my guns in my backpack, and I threw all the phones in my backpack. And I don't know what I was thinking.
Was this only after you saw the credentials that you
No.
felt comfortable
When I
enough?
saw them come up, I put my guns away. The last thing I was going to do, you see, there's corruption.
Right.
And I thought they're going to kill me. Whoever responds is going to kill me. So what easier to say that, well, he was brandishing a gun.
Yeah.
I never brandished a gun. Never.
Right.
To them. Never. Not even to the Zetas. I mean, they never saw me with a gun. Not even the ambulance guy. I never brandished a weapon. And so there was a little bit of talk, well, Victor had guns. And let me tell you, they never saw a gun and never showed a gun to anybody. But I knew the controversy of the weapons in Mexico. Everybody's armed.
You made sure not to
My
present
instinct was throw everything, and especially the phones. Like, they're not going to take this intel from us, and they're not going to get it.
Right.
And I remember when they put me in the helicopter, and I was yelling at them, "You bring that bag. That bag doesn't leave my sight." And they're like, "All right." So they brought my backpack with me when they carried me into the helicopter, and they're like, "What about your partner?" And I said, "What about him? You bring him. You're going to bring him. I'm not leaving without him." And they brought him and they put him in the back. And it was about an 8-minute flight to San Luis Potosí, the city of the state by the same name. Hospital de la Salud. We landed there in the helipad, and they took us in, and they took me to one trauma room. They took Jaime to another. and the bag was in between my legs, bro. The whole bag, like it's not leaving my sight because in Mexico it's called a diplomatic pouch. It's your pouch. Whether it's my luggage, nobody can search it. But they didn't know at the hospital that we were Americans. But I want to go back because I said I was going to mention this about foreign, and let me tell you, I felt that 40 minutes we waited for them to get there. It's a long time.
It's a real long time.
A long, long time. And I felt like such a foreigner in Mexico. I felt like I was in China for all intents and purposes. I wasn't from there. Right away, I realized I'm not from here. And we're not friends. And the Mexicans are not our friends. And you'll hear me say that a lot. And people, how dare you? What do you mean the Mexicans? They're not. No. And I'm not talking about the people. People need to understand. I'm not talking about the people. I love the Mexican people. It's the government. Mm-hmm. The government is not the friend of the United States. Look, and we're going to talk about border.
Was that the first time you realized
well, no. That's not the first time because I was working with the government day in, day out. I had access to go to their offices and all that stuff. I knew they weren't our friends. I had words sometimes with high-level officials, very diplomatically, but I had words with them. And sometimes it had to do with the loyalty. Sometimes it had to do with the rules of the government because they didn't like us. They're being there. They didn't like us. They didn't like the big brothers watching. And they were like, why are the Americans here? Like we didn't let them do whatever they were trying to do, whether it was corrupt or not. And since they wanted us present at takedowns, I did some crazy stuff in Mexico, and they wanted us there. And they didn't want us there, the Mexican, and they were forced to because of the agreements that the governments had made, right? And so they didn't appreciate it. They didn't like it. Now, with me, it was a little different because I didn't work a lot of the drugs. I worked more with the human trafficking. And I was training the Mexican federal police on how to rescue these girls, right? And I remember I would fly them to places like Miami, and they would interview the victim that we had already rescued on the U.S. side. And I would tell them, you can't just go in there. How do you train somebody? I've been trained for years, right? And the investigation or the interrogation and questioning of a victim is very different, very delicate. Sometimes I couldn't even do it because I'm a male. Yeah. I needed a female agent or a female NGO, a non-governmental organization that would help me just to start building rapport. These women and these girls have been through some horrific their trauma, right? But I didn't have that time. I just had to train them on the fly.
So, Victor, we know how the Mexican government is. When you're training these guys on rescuing these girls and whatever, did you feel that any of these officers or agents had cared? Or was everybody corrupt?
No. So they're all corrupt. But it's a thing in Mexico. I got stuff done. So one of the first times that we did, they interviewed the victim. They were in there for like 8 hours. They came out and they basically told me in Spanish, let's go get those mother effers. Mm-hmm. That's the way they told me. I can't believe what these guys have done to this little girl. I said, I told you, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they're the police, they're corrupt, whatever. But because it was human trafficking, they're like, whatever, the cartel, whatever, this little girl doesn't deserve that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was successful in taking a lot of groups down. I mean, we did some good work, Mexican undercover work. I mean, a lot of good stuff. Some that I can't talk about, but I'll just tell you, the ends were different than the means that we do in the U.S. Sure. And I frankly didn't care. I wasn't there to fix the whole country. I understood that my role. All I knew is that if at the end we were saving children, we were rescuing victims, and we were taking down bad guys, that was good enough for me. Yeah. And I was always very frank with them. I was always very honest with them. And I told them the intel. And if this is the way you like it, great. If not, it's your country. I have no authority here. You have to do it. I am with you, but you have to want to do it. And they did. Yeah. And so we did. Rescued. I put a case in there in this book. I don't know if you read it. The one in New York.
I've started.
You started. So you're gonna read one. I'm not gonna give it away, but it's one of the worst ones that I worked in New York, Mexico to New York, and they had these women, these girls in horrific conditions, mostly sexual exploitation. I did work some forced labor ones, but that's the way the government was. Anyway, we're at the hospital. That's when the fear set in for me. And I want to tell you, I use the word petrified because I didn't know what other vocabulary word existed in the English language to describe the fear that I had. There is no word. Whatever petrified times 100. Yeah. Because it is a very, very ugly feeling to have when you know you're going to die. And when I was going to the hospital, that was convinced.
You know, listening to this story, acknowledging that you're going to die, I think that happens to people and they go, man, you always hear people say, man, I thought I was going to die. Your I thought I was going to die experience has lasted an hour now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, it lasted a long time. And I'll tell you, I'm going to be honest. No, my life did not flash before my eyes, when I was getting shot at and all this thing. No.
You didn't see the light?
No, I didn't see that. I did go into all modes: fight, flight, and freeze. I went through all of them. I literally went. Now when I look back, I went through all of it. Training, whatever kicked in, I did whatever I tried to do, right, to survive. But when I was back in the hands of the government into the hospital, that's it. I thought, I worked these cases where the cartel go and kill people at the hospital. Mm-hmm. I thought, this is it. And I was begging my friend on the phone to send the people, the backup, because there was only a few of them, and the hospital is a big place.
I was going to ask you, the U.S. hasn't gotten there yet?
No. The U.S. the shooting happened at 2:15 p.m. And I remember being in there. I refused IV. I refused medication, and my blood pressure and my heart rate were through the roof. And they're like, we're trying to stabilize. They thought we were Mexican federal police, and I was okay with that. I didn't give them my name. I thought these people are gonna kill me. And I had my backpack in between my legs, and then they had to take, because they cut my clothes. They cut my jeans, and they put the backpack. I said, what are you doing with my backpack? And they're like, they got all scared at the hospital. I said, no. And they put it right next to my feet right here. I want to have access to my gun still, Mm-hmm. And
is Jaime still with us at this point? Or
so he's in the trauma room about, I would say within an hour. I don't remember, but within the hour, the doctor comes in and says, I'm sorry to inform you that your partner has passed away. And I said, please treat him with dignity and respect. And he says, I will. And then the reinforcements came in, the big SWAT guys, big dudes, all covered masks, and come in, and a lot of them. And they came into those double doors of the room. And I remember,
these are still Mexican.
This is Mexican federal police. This big dude, Victor Avila. I said, yeah, I'm here on direct orders from my friend. This place is secure. This hospital is surrounded by federal forces. You are safe. And that's the first time I breathed a little sigh of relief. I'm like, okay, I'm good. And they're like, no one's going to come in and no one's going to come out. All right. And then I told them, my name is Victor Avila. I'm an American. And this is the part that people, it's hard to understand, but I'm a proud American, right? And I told them, I'm an American, I'm a U.S. diplomat, I'm a U.S. federal agent from the U.S. Embassy. And Jaime is a special agent. And you could see the reaction of the staff, like, oh, they're, I'm going to tell you, I got great care. Great care. That I never complain about. They treated me well. They did all these ultrasounds, and I had a lot of shrapnel in my groin area. They were looking at a lot of my groin area, and I know, in my legs and everything, and so it was a very stressful. Then I was on the first floor, and they're like, what? They're like, we don't want them on the first. Go third floor. And so once they stabilized me, third floor, and then just this Black Hawk starts landing next to the building in a grassy area, because the helipad was already full or taken by our helicopter, and the second in command of the federal police lands right there, and he shook the building, and it's like, oh, it's the federal police, all right. I'm like, who is it? And so he comes in. I knew the guy, and he comes in to my bedside. He comes with his BlackBerry, and he has a picture of a blue Suburban, and he tells me, oh yeah, look, it looks like they confused you for the head of the federal police of the San Luis Potosi area. He drives around in a blue Suburban. And I was in my bed, and I said, "That's not my blue Suburban. That's a blue Suburban, but that's not my blue Suburban. It's not even close. Mine's armored, and it looks different." And then I looked at him, and this is the number 2 of the federal police of the whole country. And I would never call him by a first name. I would always call him Comandante, right? And I called him Luis. And I said, "Don't you remember me, Luis?" And he was taken aback that I called him Luis. And he looked at me and I said, "Don't you remember we had lunch, the sushi with the congresswoman, talking about human trafficking?" And his face, he like turned around and walked away, left, got back on the helicopter and left. That guy's in custody right now in Mexico for torture, drug trafficking charges. He's in custody. As a matter of fact, the head of the federal police, Genaro Garcia Luna, if you've ever seen the news lately, he's been sentenced in New York. They're Sinaloa cartel members. They've been the whole time and taking bribes from them.
Oh, man. That's a difficult enough job on its own. And then to have officials at that level who are corrupt, it's an impossible task, man.
So people would ask us, like, well, there's other people that we had to deal with. I mean, those are the people that the government put, right? I mean, it's not like we get to choose who we work with, but every day you talk about negotiating. And that's why I tell people I bring these very unique skills of negotiating. Sure. So if I can negotiate who's a cartel member and who's not, I can negotiate in D.C. for the people of CD23. I'm pretty good at that. I have that very, very unique experience, and so yeah, it's an everyday thing.
A lot of these guys, do they show their hand? Like him, for example. Did you ever know before that day that he was involved with cartel?
No, it's not that you knew. We just assumed. You had to assume that.
Well, there's got to be certain behaviors that people exhibit, and you got to go, that's happening for a reason.
Money, properties, sure. Power. You could see. I went to some of these places. I'm like, this guy can afford this on this Mexican federal salary? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But, so it's the other way around. Instead of assuming that they were all clean and then maybe some are dirty, no, we had to work the other way. They're all dirty. Let's see who's clean. Yeah. I mean, when we were vetting and putting our group together, we had a polygraphers come in. And we would rent a couple of, the polygraphers, it's a process. So you go through a polygraph examination, and then after you get questioned, they send them to me. So I could finish the questions in a kind of interrogation after I hear the results, right? And depending on what you said, then I get to interrogate you on that. Well, the first group they sent us 50 police officers, federal police officers, and 3 passed. all 47 failed. Human rights violations, people they had killed, they had murdered, they had done all this crazy stuff on the job. Some ran from the hotel, some confessed and cried, some didn't want to talk. I mean, different level stuff here. So it was a daily occurrence. So as you can imagine, that turned my life and that of my family's upside down. My wife and kids, by the way, they're taken to
trauma.
No, but they're taken from the apartment to a hotel in Mexico City because now there's chatter saying that maybe they know where I live because remember the GPS, the Garmin GPS, my address was on there. And so they tell my wife, pack a bag. Well, my wife packs a bag and they go to a hotel room. They keep them there overnight, like a day and a half until they fly me from the hospital in San Luis Potosí to
How long were you in the hospital?
From the shooting happened at 2:15. The first Americans showed up like around 7:30 p.m. And then everybody showed up. DEA, FBI, ICE, U.S. Marshals, Secrets, everybody was there. The embassy doctor came with them. And he's the first one that says, man, Victor, I got to give you something, man. Your heart rate is going to come. Your heart's going to come out of your chest. Because my adrenaline kept on going. And I said, okay, you could give me, but what's going on? And he said, we're going to get you out of here because the Mexican government at that point, here we are, we're in a foreign country, different rules, different laws. You're under arrest. What do you mean? I am? Yeah, you're detained because in Mexico, there's a very fine line between being the victim of a crime or being culpable of the crime. There's almost no difference.
Yeah.
Even if you're the victim, well, you're guilty of something, so we're holding you too. So that's the way they see it. They were holding Jaime's body, and they were adamant that they wanted to do an autopsy, and we were the government of the U.S. was fighting. No, you're not. Yes, we are. No, you're not. Well, we lost that battle, and they did their autopsy in Mexico right then and there. And with me, like, we're gonna keep Victor. Well, I had a level of diplomatic immunity, not like the ambassador. There's different levels.
Sure.
I had the lowest, basically, but I still had some protection. I had a black passport, and I had some protections, but they didn't care. Like, we're gonna hold him and interrogate him, and And so DEA let us borrow their plane, and they flew me out at 3 a.m, and that's when he gave me a pill to kind of calm me down. Showed up in Houston, and then.
Do you still have your bag at this point?
Huh?
Do you still have your bag at this point?
So when the Americans showed up, when I went to the 3rd floor, they put it in one of those lockers in front of and the bag was in there, and then that's when I gave it over to one of our agents.
Okay.
I said, take the bag, and he took possession of them.
So in less than 24 hours, you were back in the United States.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and then the next day, they flew me from Houston to El Paso, and that's where I reunited with my family.
Jeez. When were y'all able to get Jaime's body back from that hospital?
So after the autopsy, then they released the body, and then they flew him to Dover, Maryland, which everybody goes. Any soldier, anyone killed in line of duty if you're under the assignment of the federal government, you go to Dover, and they do another autopsy there. And then they received his body there, and then they did another autopsy, and then the funeral was later on that week in Brownsville. And I remember I showed up in scrubs because the doctor in Houston, the surgeon, is like, what do you need? He's an older gentleman. By the way, he knew the doctor that treated me in San Luis Potosí.
Really?
They were in a conference together. He says, you were in very good hands. And he says everything they send all the stuff and x-rays and everything they did with me, and he was reviewing everything. He says, well, it's good. They did a couple more tests, and they duplicated a couple, but all the stuff, they said, this is good stuff. Like, I'm using this because my bullet is still in my leg.
Oh, wow.
They never took it out. And I told the doctor, I'm not going to take it out either. Right? It's too intrusive to go in there, and we'll tear the hell out of everything, and you might have good functioning of your leg. Let's just let it encapsulate, and it is. It's encapsulated in scar tissue. Yeah. It's 0.2 millimeters from my femur.
Really?
Yeah. And so he says, what do you need? I said, I need clothing. I don't have any clothes. And he brought me some brand new scrubs, those green scrubs, hospital scrubs. Yeah. That's what I showed up in El Paso. And then my dad let me borrow some sweatpants. And I tell people,
because they just got y'all out of Mexico.
You leave your house today.
Yeah.
And you never go back.
Yeah.
Ever.
You didn't pack.
What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you need? Well, you need a toothbrush.
Yeah.
Well, you need, life goes on. My kids needed school supplies. My wife had packed shorts and short sleeve shirts because it was 72 degrees in Mexico City. Well, I needed a suit to go to the funeral.
Yeah.
So I had the SRT team that was protecting us. I said, I got to go to Dillard's. And they took me to Dillard's in a wheelchair and PT, and the Dillard's guy, when we walked into Dillard's with this whole security team, the guy's like, I wear a 42 short, this one, boom, boom, boom. I need a black suit, and you know how they have to hem it, like you know how they tell you come back 3 days. No, he needs it now, and the guy's like, I'll do it right now. Like,
so you still had,
he did it right there.
You were still guarded once you were here in the States.
Oh yeah,
They were still concerned
24/7 because there was they call it there's a term that they use officially, but it's a threat to law enforcement. So yeah, heavily guarded. And then I got the suit and shirt and tie. Well, I didn't have anything. I'm not going to show up to Jaime's funeral without anything. So that's how we showed up. At the end of the week, we flew to Brownsville, did the funeral. That was very, very stressful because that's the first time I got to see the family, and they wanted to see me. And I thought I was prepared to see them, and I thought it was just going to be Mr. and Mrs. Zapata. But it was like 50 family members in the big room. And it was at the convention center. That's how big this funeral was. And so they said, the family wants to see you. You want to talk to them? I say, of course. And so my wife and I walk in there, and there was a gasp in the room. You could hear him when I walked in. And I'm like, what? And they
am I bleeding?
And they came at me and like, oh, what happened? and man, I couldn't handle it. And my wife, Claudia's like, leave him alone. They're crying and tell me, it's very, 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 very stressful, man.
It's a lot of heartbroken people. It's a terrible situation because the family's got.
You can't blame them either.
No, you can't blame them. I'm the last one to see their son alive. I understand this, but I wasn't prepared. I thought I was. That day later came where I sat with them in a private room and I told them everything. I told them everything, detail, because I think I owed them that, and so we did the funeral, and Napolitano, Eric Holder, two of the guns used against us are part of Operation Fast and Furious.
Really?
They wouldn't want to. They didn't want.
They didn't know that.
No.
They didn't want to shake my hand.
Really?
And I was pretty upset. I was pissed by it. I was sitting there in the front row in a wheelchair.
Janet Napolitano.
Napolitano, Secretary of Homeland Security, the second head of DOJ, Lenny Brewer, Eric Holder, the Attorney General of Mexico, of the United States. They're all right there, and they didn't come say hi to me. And I'm like, what the hell? I said, take me.
Slap in the face.
I said, take me.
Yeah.
Take me. Push me. Some guy was pushing me. I said, push me in front. They were sitting in the front row. I'm on this side, and they were on this side. I said, take me in front of them. I'm gonna fucking say hello. Right? Like, I was just pissed.
You got 3 bullets, and you're not gonna come.
And I went, and they're like, oh, hi. Like a human being would be like, Agent Avila, I'm glad you're whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you. Somebody call my parents. Somebody call somebody. No. Keep it hush-hush. Don't you talk about it. Don't you say anything. And they were successful in keeping me quiet for a few years. And then I never went back to work. We went to D.C. You can't be on the border. Go to D.C. I did all my physical recovery in D.C. Great health care. Great. I mean,
so
the rehab.
You feel like they tried to, maybe for lack of better words, shut you up, but also just kind of keep the situation quiet long enough that it goes away?
Oh, yeah.
Sweep it under the carpet.
Silence. I mean, they silenced me. They didn't want me to team up with the Zapata family, but we eventually did, but they kept us apart for a long time. And
I guess they did the same to them, huh?
Right. We sued the government together. Didn't go anywhere. It's very hard to sue the government. You have to have these pathways to seek the litigate. There's different ways to litigate, but the government has a lot of immunity, and a lot of it was catch-22. The judge in southern Texas would say he was sympathetic to us. Well, give me the information. Well, we can't get it because the government won't give it to us because President Obama exerted executive privilege on all the documents, so they're untouched. So we can't get the documents. How do we give them to the court? The court's like, I believe you, but I need the documents. You can't just say, you have to prove it. Well, they won't give it to us, and you can't. So that's the end of that. They dismissed the whole thing. No recovery, no nothing. Because we wanted gross negligence. We're trying to say this is gross negligence from the agency for putting us on that road, the everything that I told you alert and all that. It never went anything. And so
just this is purely speculation, but I can assume it's because of the fact that there were Fast and Furious guns involved.
I think so. That was part of it. That's the biggest part of it, I think. And people are like, well, because you sued the government. No, people sue the government all the time. Sure. And no, it was the weapons and possibly other things too.
That was such a debacle. And if you can kind of run through it real quick so people understand exactly what Fast and Furious was, because you'll know better than I will. Yeah.
So Operation Fast and Furious originated in the Phoenix office, and it was led by ATF. But what a lot of people don't know is everybody was involved. FBI, DEA, even ICE was involved. And they were involved in walking guns to Mexico. When I mean walking is allowing the guns to go into Mexico undetected or not followed. The U.S. government allowed straw purchasers, people that are clean background, go into gun shops in Phoenix, Arizona, and buy 700 AK-47s. We're going to catch the fish. We're going to let them buy these guns, and we're going to let them take them to Mexico to see where we are, and we're going to take them all down. Well, no. They went into Mexico, and that was the end of it. Nobody followed them into Mexico. Someone that worked in Mexico, I could see how we would set up a sting and say, like, what we call a controlled delivery, a CD. Well, I did a lot of CDs going into the U.S. with drugs and humans. I did a lot of those. Well, I could see it if we coordinated with Mexico. Remember, Mexico has customs. Mexico has immigrations. They have a border. But everybody, when they talk about the guns went south, Well, why weren't any of the guns ever intercepted? Why weren't they ever interdicted? Why didn't anybody of the customs agent say, hey, I got a load of guns? No, that never, right? Because they're corrupt.
Yeah.
They're bought off, right? The same thing with the fentanyl and China bringing in the cursors. When have you heard we took down 3,000 pounds of liquid cursors and chemicals from, and the Puerto de Veracruz. No, because they always come in. They always come in because it's paid off. And so the guns always made it to the hands of the cartels. And so there was no coordination. I could see how maybe we could have coordinated one. In Mexico, we follow it to the warehouse, wherever the heck this 700 guns go. And by the way, it was thousands of guns. And we'll take that group down, right? No, that part never happened. The Mexican ATF, the U.S. ATF agents in Mexico didn't even know this was happening. They wanted that Operation Fast and Furious to expand into the rest of that was going to be the model, if you can believe it. But there's other nefarious reasons. This is the Obama administration. They hate guns.
Sure.
So they want to paint a terrible picture. I think some of it happens with the active shooters that we see today. All this shit that happens, with the shooters is blame the gun to disarm us.
Sure.
And I think Fast and Furious, deep down, the bigger picture, that's what it is.
Well, at some point, I would imagine they would have come back to the gun store and said, "Hey, you sold guns to a cartel.
Well, good.
We're shutting you down."
Well, you're right on, because that's exactly what happened. So the gun shop owner said, after the gun shop owner's like, wait a minute, 700 guns? ATF, it's an investigation. Oh, I want to cooperate, right? I'm an American. I want to cooperate with the federal government. This is good. Well, after a while, the gun shop owner's like, wait a minute.
I don't feel right about
I don't feel right. This doesn't feel right. You keep on buying thousands of guns. By the way, it's not just one shop. There were several. Sure. And it went into Nevada and other states. It wasn't just Phoenix. It went to New Mexico and to Texas.
Yeah, somebody didn't go to one FFA.
No. And then even the gun shop owner's like, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
And they questioned it. As soon as they questioned it, boom, in jail. Someone to jail.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't realize.
Friends of mine now, they went to jail. They shut down. They took away their FFL license. They shut down their shop. That was their livelihood. And you went to jail for questioning us. And because they knew. Because at one point they said, I'm not going to sell you the guns anymore. No, I'm not going to do it. Oh, you're not? Boop, shut down.
Wow.
Go to jail.
And years later, you remember what happened in 2012 in Benghazi, right? Mm-hmm. At the annex over there. Years later, they found out that a bunch of those weapons that they used to attack the annex and the ambassador at the safe house were Fast and Furious weapons.
Fast and Furious guns in Benghazi. Fast and Furious guns have been in Benghazi. Fast and Furious guns will be in the active shooter in Paris and in France about 5 years ago. Remember, like massacred Fast and Furious weapon.
The Charlie Hebdo thing?
Yes.
Yeah, the Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah. Fast and Furious gun. Thousands. They went all over the world. El Chapo was on a 50 caliber Fast and Furious gun seized from him in Mexico. And Agent Brian Terry, Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry, was what blew up 2 months before our shooting. Agent Brian Terry was murdered in Arizona, the Bortec agent. Mm-hmm. And that's what blew up Operation Fast and Furious. But you'll hear Agent Brian Terry's name, but you'll never hear Jaime Zapata. That and it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, because that's another federal agent killed with these weapons in Mexico. But this is how successful the government was to kind of push that under the rug, and nobody knew about it. So it's my job to tell people, and I'll say the story until I die. So as many people that there was a sacrifice from a U.S. federal agent that gave his life in protecting the homeland in Mexico. The other agent that was killed in Mexico hadn't happened since 1985, where DEA agent Enrique Camarena was captured and killed and tortured, and that hadn't happened. So there was this understanding, and this is the shift that's happening in Mexico right now. So we'll get a little bit into the border. The cartels, there was always this understanding, we don't mess with U.S. federal law enforcement because we don't want the wrath of the federal government on us. Well, that's old. They didn't on February 15, 2011, that went out the window. These guys didn't care. They're not afraid. The cartel's not afraid of anyone, not the Mexican police, not the politicians, not the U.S. federal government. They don't care anymore. That's why, especially what we see right now, the government of Mexico, AMLO, the president of Mexico, has given them free range. Yeah. And so, if you think about it, the Biden administration...
What was his deal? It was brazos no balazos.
Brazos no balazos. And he still stands by that today. because he's a socialist communist. He's out of control.
Well, he even said the other day when they talked about, because there's been talk about making the cartel like a terrorist organization.
Yes, I write a chapter in the book about that.
And he says recently how we're going to stand for our sovereign borders, and
we're not going to allow the United States to come in here. We're going to protect our sovereignty. You know what my answer is to that? What about ours?
Yeah.
What about the United States sovereignty? It's being disrespected by millions of people and hundreds of countries all over the world. Why are we allowing that? What about our sovereignty? What about our protection? What about our homeland? Oh, don't you dare talk about it because I'm the racist, because I want to defend my country? I've had about enough.
Yeah.
That's why I'm running.
Sure.
Because I'm angry. And especially with Mexico. I want to go in there and have a chit-chat with them now. It's a very different one that the incumbent in CD23 had with the Democrats, because he went with the Democrats. I want to go talk to Mexico in very different. I'm going to have a very different conversation with them. It's about accountability. It's about the role that they're playing right now. The millions of people that are coming there, other than the Mexicans, are illegally present in Mexico. And you know what? They have the most strictest immigration laws in Mexico. You know why I know? Because I used to work there. And I have actually observed the laws that when they execute them, you be careful. Mexico's corrupt, but they have laws. If you ever get caught in Mexico and they say, we're going to prosecute you, you're done. Because they opened up that law book, you're done. You don't want them to open the law book. Because they will throw away the key. And they're like, we're going to go by section, blah, blah, la chinga. You know?
When they want to.
When they
want to, they want to. I've seen it happen. I'll give you a quick case. Good in the result of the cooperation with the U.S. We had a fugitive, an ICE fugitive, wanted, was in Mexico, Cuban national. Was he's illegally present in Mexico, right? So we asked the Mexican government, we need to deport this guy. So we grab him in Mexico, and sections of the deportation, right? They could deport everybody if they wanted to. They could spend the money in planes and all that, but they just don't want to. But this case, I tell you why it can be done. So fugitive, the only difference is that we got to deport him back to Cuba. Good. But somehow, I don't know how it happened, the airplane landed in Miami first. And so when the plane landed in Miami, he got hooked up by ICE, HSI, Miami, and we took him, right? Because we wanted him. Mm-hmm. We work things like that, right? We do things like that. And Mexico cooperates with things like that using their laws. So what upsets me right now, why aren't they using them right now? Why aren't they deporting people right now? Why aren't they deporting the people from Africa, from Uganda, from Sierra Leone, from Brazil, Haiti, from China, from Haiti, from Cuba, from Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, and I could go on and on. Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Bangladesh, Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Yep, all 89 different countries.
You know what?
That was the last count.
Close to 150 countries now.
Really now?
What we see on the news is we see a flatbed tractor trailer with a bunch of people with my skin color.
Yeah.
Sweaty, hot, and tired.
Yes.
And that's what they're telling you is coming through the border. But how is somebody able to finance a plane ticket to get to Mexico to come across the border? You don't hear that portion of it.
No.
And I want to kind of get into all of it, but there's two sides of me, right? There's the wheat side and there's the frosty side, right? Mm-hmm. And part of me goes, I would love to help as many people as we can. Right, there's that aspect of it. There's, the legal immigration portion of it is there's a means.
And that's the key right there.
Sure.
There's a means there. There's a way to do it. Maybe it could be streamlined a little faster. Maybe that could work a little bit better. Coming illegally isn't the way, but they don't show you that. They show you the people that you want to feel sorry for on the news. But you're seeing more and more just males coming, right?
Yes.
And so then you get to the flip side, what we were talking about earlier, where you're putting American citizens in positions that they don't need to be in if the policies were better and that things were handled better. And if we were talking about trafficking, and I really wanted to get into that too, because you hear all these stories about, and again, you'll know the truth behind most of this stuff. I'm just hearing things through the news and stories and whatnot, but you hear about I think it was a year or two ago, they were talking about how they would take a kid, they would put them in with a male and a female. This is a family, get them across. They take that same damn kid and send them back to Mexico to do it all over again.
Yeah, true.
And it's like, if you care about children, why wouldn't you do something more to stop this?
So let me go ahead, Gary.
Well, back in 1999, when Hurricane Mitch came through like El Salvador and Central America, we had a big influx. It was nothing like it is now. And we had a bulletin board. It was way before the days of cell phones and stuff. And I remember we made a joke because there was a baby that came across with a family, and he had like a birthmark. And we said, hey, look, the birthmark looks like Florida, you know? So we got him through NTAs, the whole thing. A few days later, that same baby came through with some different people. We're like, hey. So we started taking pictures.
The birthmark.
The birthmark. So we started taking pictures of all the children, putting them up on the board. They were getting recycled.
But what year was that?
99.
So right before I went to Mexico, I worked a human smuggling case in El Paso, and I wasn't the case agent. I was one of the agents working this case. We took down a human smuggler from El Salvador in El Paso, hit a motel. The agent had been working the case, and he's like, it's time to take him down, and we're gonna take down the smuggler because he's here. He wouldn't always come from El Salvador, and when he was in El Paso, all right, it's time to take him down. And we hit a hotel, and there was like 17 illegal aliens in there, all adults. We get them. We call Border Patrol to help us because ICE agents suck at processing. So the agents would help us process. And the agents are doing the thing. They're interrogating the guy. I'm over here helping, process and all that stuff. And the lady in the tank, one of the aliens from the hotel room, she's like, in Spanish, he has my child. He has my daughter. And I go, what are we talking about? There's no kids in the hotel. No, I gave him my daughter. He has my daughter. And I go and talk to her. And he says, that's what they arranged, right? I can never understand why you would give up your child, but desperation, whatever. But they do. And so I call the agents out of the interrogation room. Like, hey, bro, this is what's going on. Let me give a crack at this guy and see what's going on. I said, yeah, go at it. So I go at him, and we go at him pretty hard. And he breaks, and he says, yeah, gives us an address. We suit up right there that night. We suit up. We go hit this house. 24 kids.
Wow.
No, none of them. With four adults in there, 4 illegals. Including her 18-month daughter in there.
So they're separating the kids from the parents.
It's been happening for a long time. What's happening now, Gabe, is the numbers. The multitude. So think about 18. We're like overwhelmed. Now we needed diapers, milk, car seats, CPS. It triggered.
Yeah.
So now say 300,000. Well, what the hell do you do? So the problem that I have, that there's no law and order, it's lawlessness down there, is that if you would ever endanger your child here in San Antonio, Texas, the CPS is going to be called on you.
Sure.
The sheriff's going to come knock on your door. But if you're an illegal alien, nobody questions it. It's okay.
It's so infuriating. You know that?
Why doesn't the law apply to them?
Yeah.
They can get on an airplane in San Antonio, because I was here, and the whole airport is full of illegal aliens. In McAllen, in El Paso, and in Brownsville, the whole airports are full of illegal aliens. But they get to get on an airplane without any identification. You can't. Neither can you, Gary. And no one in the United States could do it. I guarantee you. I already tried. In front of the illegal aliens, I've tried to get on an airplane without showing my ID, and they've denied me. No, you have to. I said, but what about these people from Africa? They don't have an ID. What did they show you? Oh, they get very offended, TSA. But this is the problem that we have. It's coming down,
and then they'll ban you from the airline.
And yes, and so it's purposeful.
Yeah.
It's done on purpose from down to the border patrol, the interior enforcement of ICE, HHS, all these groups to the airport, the airlines. Nobody says anything. What in the world? What the heck is going on?
I saw you in El Paso. Maybe a week ago.
Yeah, that's
walking around the church.
Yeah. Oh, did you see that?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And you know what it brought flashbacks of? And this is just me with the visual, right? It reminds me of Scarface in the very beginning of the movie.
The Marelitos.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
They're under the overpass. And
yes, sir.
That's the feeling I got from that.
Well, that's a very good feeling, because if you saw in my video, 90% of them are single adult males.
Yeah.
I'm like, where are the family units? Where are the children? I see one kid there. I see. Oh, by the way, let me tell you, that group, right now, as we speak, they're there. There's thousands there. and I'll be back in El Paso on Wednesday. At night, drugs. They're smoking weed. They're smoking meth, prostitution, loud music, drinking, partying. Outside right there where they're at.
Yeah.
During the day, they're all asleep on their phones. and people they're here to work. Listen, and I want to go back to this, what you mentioned. I'm also a compassionate guy. And I'm a humanitarian person, but I'm a true humanitarian. I would want to avoid putting these people in that situation to begin with.
Yes.
If they knew that the border was secure and that they were not going to be allowed to come in, they would never be allowed, and their children and the girls to get raped multiple times from the Darien Gap all the way through Mexico multiple times. That's why they give them female condoms and the morning after pill, just at least so they won't get pregnant. The men get raped, the men get assaulted, the men get extorted, they get robbed. All these things happen. They're victimized.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about victims? We have American victims, which those are senseless, 100% preventable crimes. And I talk a lot about and give a voice to the victims, because these people all over the United States, the angel moms, have had their loved ones killed by an illegal alien in this country.
Yeah.
And they're like, then when you become a victim, or their daughter raped, and you're like, why? Well, we already have enough crime. We have a lot of crime in this country to begin with, right? And right now we have a big crime surge everywhere. And so now you add the illegal immigration criminal coming in, and it gets to the point where we cannot absorb that. And so when something's got to give. So at the school systems, the healthcare system, the criminal justice system, in different towns and small towns, they're now feeling it everywhere. I'm getting support from all over the country because they know that CD23 is ground zero.
Sure, and it's a large portion of the border.
If you protect that, you're going to protect me in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. They know that. I have support people from New York and Connecticut, like, please secure the border, Victor, because over here we have these small independent school districts, and we got 30 kids ones, and they're like, they don't even speak Spanish.
Yeah.
They don't even speak Spanish. They're illiterate in their own language. And then you talk about health problems in El Paso right now, the group that we're talking about, chickenpox outbreak, bed bugs, tuberculosis, people in crutches. I saw them in bandages in their legs and all that. And I'm like, I tell the Border Patrol agents, what's going on with this? Oh, no, we got to take them to the hospital here that you and I have to pay the bill for. But if you're an American, you'll get that hefty bill in the mail, and you better pay it. This is wrong. This is upside down and backwards. And this administration is designed this way. Now, you'll hear Mayorkas lie and lie and lie over and over. He was actually in Brownsville 2 days ago lying, saying that the border was secure.
Yeah. It's not open.
It's not open. And, well, wait a minute. We had 7 million people in the last 2 years come in. How can the border be secure if 7 million people came in? Title 42, big subject, right? I've been doing a lot of media, kind of educating people. Well, Title 42 is in effect right now. That means that 0 people should have come in. Mm-hmm. So if Title 42 is in effect and 7 million people come in, let me tell you what's going to happen next week. Nothing. They're all going to come in.
Thursday.
They're all going to come in. The only difference is now, because they don't have Title 42, they actually have to process them. Now, you've heard the word process lately a lot. Well, they're just processing. Well, they're not. Border Patrol hasn't actually done the real processing. And I'm talking about when you really process an illegal alien, you book them. Mm-hmm. Like when you go to a county jail.
A file.
Yes, sir. A file. That means you get issued an A file, you get a picture, prints, and there's a record of you. The last 2 years, that hasn't happened. There are no A files on these people. Think about 7 million people that have been allowed, and there's no file on them. Well, now at least they're going to do that.
Yeah.
You will be booked. But you know what the process of booking is? Anytime you go into the jail, when they book you, you have to go get a health screening. Well, they all get however many come, they all been getting a health screening. Well, he's got tuberculosis, hospital. Kidney problems, hospital. Broken leg, hospital. Didn't have any shots, measles, hospital. U.S. hospital in El Paso. They can't handle it. In McAllen, in Del Rio, in Eagle Pass.
San Antonio.
When you talk about hospitals and you talk about schools and you talk about all these institutions and entities that we have, and they're maxed. They're maxed out right now.
They are.
They're super saturated.
Yep. Let me ask you. For me, it's always speculation, right? But I'm going to ask you because you've got more knowledge on this than I do. What, in your opinion, this is what I've always been concerned with, I'm always late to the game, right? So to me, I've always worried about, hey, the beheadings in Mexico, the hanging from the bridge, all that good stuff that we've seen for years. I know that there's portions of it that are showing up in the United States. Mm-hmm. My concern is at some point our border states, and maybe not even just the border states, are going to turn into that portion of Mexico that used to be that portion of Mexico 20 years ago, 30 years, whatever it is. It's going to migrate up this way. And then the other question that kind of I start to think about is at what point, and again, I may be naive, at what point are these career politicians as corrupt as the Mexican politicians we've been complaining about for years? I'm sure it's happening now.
They're already there.
But it's like to find out that somebody's being paid by the cartel. It's like it's so blatant. It's such a slap in the face to the public. It's such a slap in the face to somebody who's a compassionate person to sit there and say, hey, the border's not open. Wink, wink. And you have all these desperate people sending their children up here, and they're taken advantage of and raped, like you said, and it's like, it blows my mind. We don't care about that. We act like we do. We say, oh, look, these kids in cages. They said that for years. Yeah. But you don't care about the little girl who gets raped for thousands of miles coming up from South America.
And the one that's trafficked. So let me start it from the beginning, where you the first part of the question. Violence.
I'm so mad right now, Gary.
The violence. I know the violence has spilled over a long time ago. It's worse now. The cartel are already here. They've been here for a long time. Now they have a heavier presence in Texas, in Connecticut, in Bozeman, Montana, in South Dakota. Everywhere they're present full time. They live here. What are they doing? Well, now they took over the human smuggling. Before the drug, it was the drug cartels. I don't call them drug cartels. They're terrorists. But they realize, hey, wait a minute, these human beings, they pay a lot of money. And if I traffic them, one thing is the smuggling, and I'll get money off of them. Well, what if I keep possession of them? Well, I interviewed a Nicaraguan kid, 23 years old, in Del Rio. And I said, how much you pay to come over? He's like, $8,500. I told him, where did you get $8,500? Because actually, I didn't pay him. I owe him $8,500.
Those at the gas station?
Yeah. And so, how do you pay him back? He's going to Minneapolis. I said, first of all, you're going to freeze your ass off. Yeah. Your eyeballs are going to freeze. He's wearing a hoodie. From Nicaragua? It's tropical weather down there. Yeah. You have no idea what the winters are over there. This is a couple of months ago. It's still cold over there. And then I tell him, you're in Minneapolis. Forget about him. You made it. No. He says, the cartel's right there. I got to pay my $1,000 a month. If I'm late, it's $300 penalty. And if I don't pay them, they kill my parents and take the house.
Wow.
What do you think that 23-year-old, good kid, not a criminal? I tell you how it is, the truth. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a very believer in illegal immigration. I want people to come to this country. I'm not an anti-immigrant. I'm a product of legal immigration myself. I want people to know that. So what do you think this 23-year-old kid is going to do? Whatever the cartel asks him. Yeah. Get enrolled into the community college, and sell meth, sell fentanyl, do whatever, forced labor, slaves. Now they're indentured servitude. They own this kid. When he pays off the $8,500, maybe never. Well, the women and the young girls are trafficked, sexual exploitation, prostitution. And they get paid over and over and over. I'm telling you, because I rescued these women, these children from these horrific conditions. And people say, child trafficking doesn't really exist, Victor. That's a right-wing conspiracy. Let me tell you, I can't get these images out of my head of what one human being is capable to do to another. It's evil. So this is a fight now of good versus evil. Sure. It's not even Republican versus Democrat. It's not even politics. It's a bigger fight here that we're facing in the country, because these evildoers are taking over, and it's in the form of the cartels. It's in the form of China. Who do you think is behind all this? It's China. It's Venezuela, and it's Cuba. They use the cartels. Believe it or not, if the cartels are the soldiers in the big picture, and the cartels are as big and sophisticated with billions of dollars, and they're the soldiers, well, think about China. They're the ones facilitating this. Well, they're killing us at 100,000 murders a year with fentanyl poisonings without having to fire a bullet.
Yeah.
And nobody says anything. But when's the last time that ISIS killed 100,000 Americans? Never. But the cartels do it, and for some reason, because it's the cartels, it's okay. Through China, it's okay. Venezuela, Cartel de los Soles, big influence. Guess who has them over in their country all the time? President of Mexico. Has the Venezuelan president, has a Cuban president over there. You can't allow that to happen as the United States of America. Well, you need fighters like me to say, no, we can't allow that. First of all, Mexico's right here next to us. It's not 6,000 miles away like the Middle East. The imminent threat is here. And people need to wake up. Because by the time you realize, by the time, God forbid, that something happens to you or your family member at the hands of one of these people, or your, I could give you thousands of examples, or your 16-year-old driver is killed head on by a drunk driver, illegal alien, or he shoots an AR-15 illegal alien, not supposed to be in possession of a firearm, and kills your family member, then you're going to say, hey, what was he doing in the country illegally? That happened years ago. It's too late.
Yeah.
We need to act now. We need to take our country back. And this is not about not wanting other people from other countries. Oh, we're a nation of immigrants. Yes, I know that. Yes, that's not the argument anymore. We're a nation of legal immigrants. Yeah. And I want that to continue to happen. As a matter of fact, I'm a big believer and fighter of fixing the legal immigration system, because that's broken too.
Sure.
I tell you the truth, it's broken. I have friends right now that are going through the legal system that have to wait 14 years.
That's crazy.
When they're looking over their shoulder and thousands of people are coming through the river, you know what they're
Hundreds of
thinking?
thousands.
They're like, well, maybe I should just go back to Mexico and pay the $4,000 and $8,000 and come over with the cartels.
Isn't that a shame that that's what we put people into?
Because we've been promoting the illegal immigration versus the legal one. Now, I have a big problem with USCIS and the asylum criteria, and I write about all that in the book. Because it's a broken system, but it's a bureaucracy. The Department of Homeland Security, as a matter of fact, if you look at the shield of the Department of Homeland Security, the eagle has its wings outside of the red. I don't know if you can see it there. Do we have a? I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it's on there. It's small.
So yeah, it's small. So when DHS was created, the eagle. The wings of the eagle is no other agency has this, pierces through the circle. They stick out. They're not within, right? They're not in here. And the reason was, and which is kind of ironic, is a little red line is because it breaks through the red tape of the bureaucracies. The Department of Homeland Security is probably the most bureaucratic, other than the Department of Labor, I would say. They're up there, both of them.
Maybe
but
EPA.
It's convoluted problems. But I could fix it because I know the system. And you know what you now fix first? After you secure the border? The legal system. If you come to this country and you prove to this country that first you're not going to be a public charge, first you're going to offer, you're already educated. You're going to offer, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a dentist, you're a good mechanic. I don't care. But you have a job, you know how to do this, you have a skill, and you're gonna bring your family in, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Bring you in. We vet you. All this exists, by the way, but we need to do it in a different process. We vet you properly. We health screen you, which we already do, and we say, okay, good. We give you a thing. You have the time to do it. Boom, boom. And instead of 14 years, maybe 5, and you prove yourself. I'm all for that. But the criminal illegal alien and the ones that are coming in, even the ones now, this is the big shift that I've seen. People don't want to work anymore.
Yeah.
They don't want to come and work. They're like, give me with some kind of entitlement. No, that's not the way it works, because the people don't want to assimilate. You have to want to come to this country because you want to be an American. My parents did it. My parents came to this country and they wanted to be Americans. As a matter of fact, they've been naturalized U.S. citizens for over 40 years. that was their mission. Their goal is, I gave up my citizenship in Mexico. I gave up because I wanted to be an American, and that's what they did. But what does it mean? It means assimilate. Well, what do you assimilate? How do you assimilate to the United States? It's very easy. God, family, and country, buddy. That's all it is. God, family, and country. And it's not complicated. But God is missing. The family is missing. And therefore you have no country. And that's the problem that we have right now with these Democrats in control. They've destroyed all those three. There's no father in the home. I've seen that all my career. People ask me all the time, what did you see in your career? Two things. Drugs and no father in the home. Almost all the time. Almost all the time. Why is this family broken? There's drugs involved and there's no father in the home or single parent. Now, I'm the first one to tell you, not just because you're a single parent, it's automatically, but the statistics are there.
Sure.
If you grow up in a single family home, all of a sudden, all the bad stats, poverty, no education, all that, crime is a vicious cycle and it's very hard to break. So we forgot about family. We forgot about God in this country a long time ago. And we need to bring that back. And so I'm going to bring that back. I'm going to bring the fundamentals back. And it starts with integrity. It starts with honesty. It starts with being a real person and saying, I understand the people at this level. I'm not anybody special. What I know is I grew up and I have the ability to see a lot of things and interact with a lot of people. Well, I want to take all that energy, all that information, all that experience, and go do something about it in D.C. What do you think they're going to tell me in D.C.? What are they going to tell me? No? I'm not afraid of them.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of the politicians, man. I lost my fear that day on Highway 57. I lost my career too, and I didn't know it. But I lost my fear. I fear God and my dad. That's still, And my dad tells me right now, he still tells me, my dad's still alive. He looks at me kind of weird. I know it's my dad. I get the look from my dad, but I'm not afraid of anybody else, man. I mean, we need to stand up for ourselves, and we need to. What's wrong with putting Americans first? Oh, if I say that, I'm the bad guy. I'm the racist. How dare you? What's wrong with that? Don't you put your family first?
Sure.
I put my kids first. I put my wife and my kids first. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to take that back, and that sense of responsibility. We need to take it back. Real quick, I'm getting off on a tangent here,
No.
But one of the things is like the budget, right? The finances. And right now there's a big issue because the economy is the economy. And it's very simple. How do you do it in your house? I know how when I grew up, I knew exactly how I was trained by my parents. And we didn't even have credit cards. And my dad paid everything cash. He sacrificed everything. Oh, one day they took out a couch on credit. Oh my God, and they're like, we got to pay it off. That's the mentality that I grew up. If you made $1,000 a month, we didn't spend $10,000.
Exactly.
But that's the way we are in this country with trillions, $31 trillion in debt. What the hell is that number? Nobody knows what that number is. It doesn't even exist. But there's no sense of responsibility anymore. There's no sense. You would do it in your house. If it really would come down to it in your house, you're like, you know what? I got to cut the cable. Well, I better cut this. I can't go to McDonald's. I can't go out and eat. You got to do something at one point or else you would drown and go into bankruptcy. So why that doesn't apply to the federal government?
I agree with you 100%. I was talking to Clay earlier, and we were talking about just the way America is heading in a certain direction, and it's so fast.
Oh yeah.
It's not like these are gradual changes. It's immediate. And my wife and I, we saw the shooting in Allen, and then we saw the guy that ran over the folks down in Brownsville. And my wife says, why is everybody crazy? And I say, I'm one of those people where, I see things and I kind of evaluate them and I go, well, maybe I'm making excuses. I told her, and I finally told her, I said, there's no God. People have gotten so far away from God. And whether you believe in God or not, it doesn't matter. The fact that you don't believe in respecting others, you don't believe that there's something bigger than you.
Thank you.
You don't believe that there's something that you should be contributing to. You see yourself as the peak of the hill. And you're not. You're a portion of it. And you need to be considerate of others. You need to be respectful toward others. We've gotten so far away from that.
Respecting your elders, respecting authority. And I'm not talking about police. I'm talking about respecting your teacher. I remember my dad when Kmart. Remember Kmart? There used to be this Walmart store.
The place to shop.
The
place to shop.
It sounds so Kmart sounds so old now, right?
Yeah.
But that's where we used to go. My dad would make me as a 8-9-year-old kid go up to the counter and ask for a gallon of paint or whatever we used to go buy at Kmart, and I hated it. First of all, I had to speak English, and I grew up Spanish is my first language. And my dad, you go in English and ask this lady.
That's because you're from El Paso.
and it respecting the person behind the counter.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking about that level of respect. Police? Oh my God, we were trained in my family. We were a little afraid of police. It was a fine line between respect and a little fear. I mean, that police car would pull up to you and you sit up straight.
Back then was when you trusted the police. That was the person you looked up to.
True.
It was an honorable thing to do.
That's right. And that came from the home.
Yeah.
That came from the home. And yeah, I was brought up in and then let me tell you, I had a very lovely, I grew up very disciplined, but a very happy home. And I've always been a very disciplined person. As a matter of fact, my wife will tell you, I'm telling you my wife's words, I became a better person because of the shooting. Because I used to sweat the small stuff. I have a twin sister that gave me a book by that title, "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff." Because I was
just going to say that
if I left this can here, and somebody moved it here, I'd flip my top, and that's not a way to live. Like, why? Who moved it? Yeah. That was me. That was me. And I was very, very, very strict that way.
Yeah.
I saw Victor speak one time, and he said that story, and I was like, exactly. And after I dealt with COVID, where I almost died with COVID, I kept thinking about that, what Victor said, don't sweat the small stuff. And I usually I got the same problems that I did before.
Yeah.
But it's like life is easy. I just don't sweat the small stuff. Sure. It's going to work itself out.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it, right? There's a lot better other things to worry about, but not about... It's insignificant, but I did become. My wife will tell you, I was a difficult guy to get. I'm an easygoing guy, but I was very guarded.
Sure.
And then being in law enforcement, only my other friends were other law enforcement people. You lived in this real sheltered world, and I really didn't like it. I didn't like that part of it because I always said part of law enforcement was very negative.
Yeah.
It was very negative. There was what was the positive? Well, you took a bad guy off the street. Yeah, that was the little positive. But everything else was so negative. Crime, murder, dead people.
That's the hard part about something like law enforcement is because you're exposed to the worst of the worst.
Yes.
Most people don't see that. So when you're exposed to that, you know that Gabe Molina doesn't see what I saw today. You know? So it's natural for you to become more introverted and more isolated, and this is my circle, and it's hard to penetrate.
That happened to me as a parole officer when I was 22 years old, and you talk about getting thrown into learning the criminal justice world, and I'm dealing with parolees coming out of TDCJ, hardcore criminals, and they've assigned me to this brand new unit they had just created. It was called SISP, Super Intensive Supervision Program, where, by the way, I realized that people that go to prison get out of prison. Almost everybody, by the way. And people think, oh, he went to prison, that's it, forget about him the rest of your life. No, he's going to come out. He or she's going to come out, and he's going to be integrated into the society. They'll be back.
Yeah.
And so you have to, I realized that. I didn't know that. I didn't just automatically know that. And then all of a sudden, murderers, gang members, rapists, bad people are right here on the monitor, and I had to follow them around and all this stuff. But what you just said, I used to warp from that world to going home. And I'm like flipping burgers that night, grilling burgers in La La Land. And I'm like, I'm so glad my family doesn't know what I just know.
Yeah.
What I just did a few hours ago. And who I encountered, or who I interviewed, or what these people did, or the file that I reviewed, grotesque pictures of a crime scene. Well, that's why we do what we do, right? To protect them from that.
When I was in the patrol, I used to see a lot of the kids abandoned out in the brush. And a lot of the drugs coming across and everything. But I was really good because I went into the patrol right out of the Coast Guard. And after seeing a lot of death in the Coast Guard on rescues and stuff, I was able to flip it off real quick. I go home, I didn't even think about work. And I had a girlfriend at the time. and I got into a shooting in Quemado. And I told you about that. And we had a date that night. It was supposed to be a dinner date, and that's when I first realized that she didn't really know what I went through at work, because I told her, hey, I'm not going to make it. She go, what happened? I can't make it. What happened? Well, I got into a shooting. What? You know, what do you mean? Yeah. And it was just, that's when I realized that people don't really know what we go through in law enforcement.
And that's why you're so close, because only law enforcement people that are exposed to that same thing can understand that.
I did a podcast with these, actually it was in Austin with the Texas Municipal Police Association. And they it's one of the biggest associations of police officers in Texas, right? And we're telling them a story, and I told them this story, and I wanted to see their reaction, because I thought, and I told them, I want to see what you guys think. But police work, I'm talking about a patrolman, right? A police officer, is boring.
Yeah.
And they're like, they look at me like they never hear anybody say that. I go, being a police officer is boring. Most of the time is routine. It's tedious. You got to write reports. It's a pain in the ass. But the problem and what people don't understand is you go from that boring to about to lose your life in half a second.
Yeah.
So the transition, there is no transition. You go from 0 to 10.
It's all off to
I saw it with police officers. And so to train for that is almost impossible. There's training, there's all that, and that's why you see what you see with the police. A lot of police officers were killed in line of duty. A lot of them, involved because they go boom, it's a switch, and it's very hard to convey that to someone that's never done the job. How do you see all these police shootings? And why did he shoot him 7 times? Why did the police officer stop the threat? Why did he shoot him? We should have just shot him 1 time in the ankle. That's not the way it works.
Yeah.
That's not the way police works. I just told you. They went from most of the
you've
time.
Heard politicians say just shoot him in the leg, and it's like,
they have no clue because they never experienced it. And I've seen journalists sometimes be put through that, and they'll have the journalists and they'll put a scenario together. And all the journalists are shooting everybody.
Or they get killed.
Yeah.
And this is a scenario, a controlled,
environment.
So when it's real, it's more difficult, even more so now, because the police don't have the backup from the media or from society in general. So you're right. All that has shifted.
Well, police, Border Patrol. We expect these men and women, and I've told Gary before, to do a nearly impossible job, and now you're no longer supported by your superiors?
I just talked to, I was in McAllen, and it was a good, cool Border Patrol appreciation barbecue. Just for them, for their families, off duty, everybody. I went and spoke, and I spoke about the families and all that, and I met a bunch of wives, and they were telling me, we don't recognize our husbands anymore. In the last 2 years, they've changed. They're not the same man. That's why we have the highest rate of suicide amongst Border Patrol agents. National Guardsmen, I think we're up to 6 or 7 that have committed suicide on the border because of so whatever problems they have, they're human like us.
Sure.
They have financial problems, marriage problems, and then you add the stress of the job. It is tremendous stress right now, beyond what people can understand. And I try to explain it to people, whoever I'm talking with, and I ask them, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a dentist. Okay, well, I'm coming to you, and I'm telling you that my molar, you see it, yeah, you have a cavity, and you need to take it out. You can identify it, but you can't do it. Yeah. You could massage me, you could do all these things, but you can't take out the molar. Why not? Because you're not allowed to. Because your organization, where your dentist is, says you can't. So the problem is still there. You can see the problem, but you can't touch it. You could do all these other things. You could comb my hair. And I go, but that has nothing to do with being a dentist. That's right. That's exactly what a Border Patrol agent is doing right now. He's massaging everything and combing the person's hair and cutting it, but it's doing nothing about the cavity. That's the problem that people don't understand. They're not being allowed to do the scope of their duties that they were trained to do. Whoever you are, a teacher, a banker, you cannot do what you were trained to do at your job. They're going to be telling you to do, well, first of all, it's humiliating. It's demoralizing. It's psychological demoralizing, because on top of all of this, it's a law enforcement job.
Yeah.
And so you were trained, and Gary, you're here to tell me, Border Patrol of all agencies is a kind of a military, very paramilitary training. I mean, very strict.
Even down to the ranks.
The ranks and the shoes and very
line.
disciplined.
As a matter of
Go
fact,
for that to go stand watch at the hospital and take care of people? That's not what they're trained to do, man.
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, when you go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, for most other agencies, you go and you attend. But when the Border Patrol goes there, back when we used to go to FLETC, we got our own academy now. But we would march everywhere we went. And the thing they told all the other agencies was, get out of the Border Patrol's way when they're marching. So,
Yeah.
Sometimes I sit and I think, why would anybody want to go into politics outside of trying to get rich? Talking to you, you're probably and not that I'm this know all be all or whatever, but talking to you, you're probably one of the only people that I can see a direct line between their past and wanting to go into politics. There's a connection there. There's a direct connection of, hey, I've been through X, Y, and Z. I've experienced X, Y, and Z. I've got knowledge of X, Y, and Z, and I would fit this job.
And thank you for saying that, Gabe, because that's absolutely true. I'm applying for a job, just like I applied when I worked at the county, and I got a state job. And I worked at a state job, and I got the federal job, and then I became an agent. I applied for all these jobs, and I was very fortunate in my career that I got the jobs. I remember when I applied from a state parole officer to be a federal probation officer. I got the letter in El Paso that we regret to inform you that you have not been selected. I cried, man. I was like, no, this is my job. I was supposed to get it. I'm an ambitious guy, right? Like, why didn't I get it? Well, I got that letter, and then a week later, I get the call from the chief and says, we're prepared to offer you a job. And I was very confused. I said, well, I got a letter. Oh, sorry, those letters go out automatically to everybody. Shit. You would have spared me.
You made me cry for nothing.
Give me my tears. But that's the way I see this. Now, the big difference here is that the craziest thing that I need to raise $1 million for a job that pays $150,000 a year. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But that's the system. That's the way it is. I can't change the system. And so I'm out here fundraising and doing all the stuff that I need to do. And I'll do it. I'm going to be everywhere. And I'm not going to be out of work, I'll tell you that. But I want to put me in the position. Give me the position. I'm applying. I'm asking the people, give me the job, and I'm going to go do the job. And I'm going to try my best at it. And I will always have the people first. And you know what? What a concept. I'm not saying anything out of extraordinary, but I'm not here about saying it. I'm here about acting on it because I'm tired of the words, and I'm really actually tired of people saying one thing and doing the other. And that's why these people, the citizens of CD23, are telling me the same thing. They feel betrayed.
Sure.
We're tired of somebody in our face saying one thing, and then you're like, oh, okay, great. And then you go over and completely opposite. They're like, come on.
And it's obvious.
It's obvious.
It's
so
blatant.
That's like the new thing in politics now. It's like, we're going to tell you one thing and do the other, and we're going to do it blatantly when we don't even care if you see it.
That's right.
And you know what people need to understand also? I think people have gotten so used to not seeing any changes, to being told one thing and seeing something else being done, that people have started to, and I'm not going to say everybody because there's never an always, there's never a never, but I think people have started to look at our career politicians as oligarchs, you know, and they see them as a different class of citizen. They think, oh, well, they're the Clintons or they're the Bushes, they're the elites, and it's like, no, they work for us, and hopefully at some point you will too.
Yes,
Victor. But they work for us.
That's right.
You know, and people need to get that.
But the other thing that's happening right now, which is what we have to change, is because this is happening right now, and the politicians and the administration has been the way that it is, people think their votes don't count.
Yeah.
And so why do they go out and vote? We just had this vote in San Antonio. We got 1.5 million people in San Antonio, I believe, right? 130,000 came out to vote.
Yeah.
You know, less than 10% came out to vote. So the people need to come out and make the difference because because of everything that's happened. They don't think their votes count. Why would I go vote? They don't count.
I'll give you a quick story because you reminded me. It had a little funny. We were in Mexico City, and my buddy and I were both from El Paso, and we went to the academy together. And I actually met him at the academy. I didn't know him when I lived in El Paso, and he's like, he always wanted to go to Madrid or one of those cool. There's these cool offices, right? We have offices all over the world: Rome, Paris, Madrid, Copenhagen, Belgium.
Lithuania.
I mean, doing really cool assignments. And my friend really wanted to go to Madrid. He's like, and I would tell him, this is the funny irony part of the story. We were talking. I said, "You're not going ever. You're lucky we're in Mexico. We got here on our merit. You and I are here because we're hard workers, and we made it here. Yeah, take it and run because you're never gonna get assigned to Madrid. That's not. We're not part of that oligarchy. That the only reason these people are there is because they had a friend or whatever connection they had. It had nothing to do with their merit or their work ethic, right? And then I go through the shooting, and I end up in Madrid. And I had this conversation later on with him. I reminded him. He's like, I remember. And I said, but I had to get shot to get to Madrid, right? And so we kind of laugh about it now. But that's kind of what you're saying. What's wrong with putting people that are qualified? Yeah. What's wrong with that? How about putting a person that is a little bit qualified to do this job, that has the at least the integrity is the word that I'm using. Sure. We lost that.
Well, that's a good place to start is with integrity. You know,
right? What could go wrong if you have integrity? Yeah. Well, you know what? I failed a lot of times in my career, in my life. I'll fail again, but it's not because I'm working. Yeah. That means that I'm working at it. That means that failure to me means success. Because if not, it's showing me that I'm advancing. That's the wrong way. Well, now I get to do it the right way. You did the wrong way. I do it the right way. And so failure to me is a part of the process. And so I'll get there and I'll learn it. Believe me. And I love when people underestimate me and say, well, Victor, don't worry about that guy. Or, you know, I like it like that. You keep me. But you show me the rules to the game, and then I'm going to beat you at them. Because that's the type of guy I am. I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to learn the system. And I'll tell you a quick story about the post office. Maybe I shouldn't share this story, but it's part of what I'm saying is I worked at the post office when I was in college, and I used to be they used to call me a casual. I was a contractor, and I used to do the route. So if there was a postman that called in sick or whatever, I would take their route. And on Saturdays, because I used to go to college, so I work in the afternoons, and on Saturday I go in at 5 a.m, sometimes straight from another place to work. Nobody knows. And then I would do like the walk. It was all walking routes, right? And I'd be done. Saturday is a very easy mail day, and I'd be done at 11. And I come back to the station, and there's nobody there. And these guys would come back at, during the week, 6, 7. And on Saturday, they come in at 3, 4 o'clock. I'm like, man, what are these guys? And then hey, they asked me one time, this postman, what time are you getting here? I've been here since 11:30. Because I would turn in and I would become a clerk. And now I have to check them out and all the registered and certified mail and all that stuff. And I would clean and all that. They had me doing everything. No. Don't you get here nowhere near before 2 o'clock. I go, what am I going to do? I don't know. He said, I don't know what you do between whenever you're done, but don't get here before 2. And that did something to me. Yeah. I'm like, this is wrong. Yeah. This is a federal employee taking advantage of the system, and it pissed me off because I'm over here working hard. Well, I want to go party. I want to go home. But no, don't you dare. The corruption within the system, right, of the federal employee, especially in the post office, right? And so I remember telling the manager when they didn't renew my contract, he's like, well, it looks like you kind of learned the system here, Victor, like how it works. I said, well, it's a fucked up system, let me tell you. Yeah. And that's what I remember telling them. I said, that I'm glad I'm not renewed. This is not for me. I'm never going to be a postman. I don't want to be part of this. You got grown men in their 50s acting worse than a child. I'm 19 years old. Yeah. They're so immature and they don't want to work. And so I don't want to be part of this. But I learned quickly that this exists in the government, by the way. Yeah, that's every agency at every level. Yeah.
That's why they pegged the term good enough for government work when you do something half-assed.
Yeah. Oh, if you're at an 80% capacity at work, oh, that's good. Oh, 80%? You're doing great.
You know, it's funny because I've said before, the most valuable resource on the planet is the American tax dollar. and people like to take advantage of that at times. You know, whether it's something like that, because it's tax dollars, right, that are paying these salaries.
It's our money.
It's our money.
It's not the government's money. No. It's the money that they took from you. They're giving it back. I mean, we're using it for our services.
That's what I tell people about their tax return. I'm like, that is not the government giving you money. That is your money coming back to you.
That's right. That's right.
Let me ask you this real quick. You talked about running on, you're fixing the border and fixing immigration. What else are you running on?
Rural healthcare. This district has a lot of rural areas, counties, 23 counties, very rural.
Victor, I'm going to stop you real quick.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you said that, man. I've got a buddy of mine. I've done a podcast with him a couple of times. His name's Bob Strauss. Bob was real bad into drugs. He used to be a musician. Was my neighbor for a long time back home. Real bad into drugs. Got arrested, ended up getting off drugs, and now he's working on creating a place for people in rural communities to come get that help. Rural America gets ignored so much, Victor.
Not under my watch, man. You got places like Presidio, Texas, Alpine, Texas, Hudspeth County. These are Americans. They've been left behind. A lot of them are ranchers. A lot of them are the ones that feed us through their cattle and their right, and they've been destroyed by illegal aliens. They've been forgotten for a long time. I'm going to make sure they have a voice. And healthcare is one of they don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
So first of all, even if they do, I'm sorry it's connected to the border, but it's taken up by illegal aliens.
Yeah.
And like, no, this has to change. And the way the healthcare system, I got a really good briefing by the Heritage Foundation when I was in D.C., an expert in this. And so he broke it down for me, how I can change that at the local level. And let me tell you, I have a really good plan. It will bring resources. It's not just about money. A lot of people say, well, I'll just throw money. Well, I'm going to build you a hospital. Well, great. Where are the doctors? Where's the staff? You got to be able to think in the future. And it's not right now. It's in the 10, 15, 20 years from now. What are you going to do? So we have a plan to be able to bring, first of all, attention and resources to at least what they have right now and expand on what they have. We could always grow, right? But I'm going to go down to these places and say, what do you need? What do you need? Hear it firsthand from the organizers, from the what do they call them, the executives of these hospitals, of these clinics. Sometimes they're clinics, they're not even hospitals. What do you need? Maybe it'd be VA care. We don't have rural VA services. Yeah. A veteran has to drive hours to get service.
As a matter of fact, the VA actually, if you got to drive more than, I forgot what the mileage is, they reimburse you because it's like so far of a drive. People drive 4 or 5 hours to get to a VA hospital.
I mean, it's not about the reimbursement, it's about the accessibility.
Sure.
Right? They're like, sometimes they need this care faster. Mm-hmm. And, well, maybe I can't go because I don't have transportation. All these other issues happen, right? Because, again, they're in a rural place. So that's another one of my that I'm running on, a rural healthcare, and make sure we change that to better the people of CD23. I'm big on the economy. The economy is tied to the border a lot. You're not going to ever see me ever vote for a stimulus bill like the incumbent voted for, because these bills, I know, I've been in the government for 20 years. It's the Border Security Act, or it's the whatever name they put on it, and then it's filled with all this pork.
Yes.
Well, the stimulus bill, the omnibus bill that was voted on, has a lot of amnesty in it. And I don't believe in amnesty. I believe we talked about that. I want people to come to this country the legal way. You shouldn't be rewarded for coming in here illegally. We already saw what happened, and we've already done it in 1986, and we did it. And we never secured the border. You have to secure the border first to do that. So the economy is another big one. I want to work on, to me, public safety. I want to see our sheriffs taken care of. They've also been left behind. Now, a lot of it is state level, but the federal government has special funding for that. I've talked to Sheriff Cole down in Kennedy County. I just saw him the other day. They have 6 deputies. Yeah. They've been wanting, they're talking about resources of having a copier. I need an extra copier. They don't have a copy machine. And Chingona Xerox.
Yeah.
A brand new one like you see in the private sector, right? They need that. You should see the office they work out of. It's this little shack. This is the sheriff's department where they've been inundated with all this crime, right? And they don't have and people sometimes resources think that it's manpower. Yeah, manpower would be great and budgets with money, but sometimes it's as easy as how about getting me some stuff in my office? Yeah. Maybe I just need an assistant, all these other things. So the sheriffs are a big issue that I work on as well.
Victor, where can people find you?
VictorAvilaforCongress.com.
They can donate there too?
Whatever you have, $5, $10. Right now, I get a notice. I get an email every time there's a donation. And God bless everybody because it's been coming in. Boom, boom. $5, $10, $100,000, whatever. People donate whatever they can. And believe me, it adds up. If you think that your $5, it does matter. It helps to pay me, not me personally, me to get me to those counties. Sure. There's a lot of travel in this. Obviously, it's 834 miles. So I got to travel from El Paso in between everywhere to San Antonio. And I'm going to be doing this back and forth, up and down, up and down, up and down. And that pays for the travel, for the advertise, all this stuff that goes into a campaign.
Sure. That
I'm learning more. Yeah. I'm learning more and more and more. It costs money.
Sure.
It costs money to run. So I ask people if you could, whatever you could afford to donate, if you want to share in my investment and invest in me, I'm going to give you a rate of return. You will get your $5 back, and you will see the difference in your community.
They can also follow you on. I like following you on Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram is I put the videos.
You have so many
Victor
great
Avila
videos.
Jr. All together. Victor Avila Jr. Facebook is at Victor Avila TX. So Facebook and Instagram are the ones where I post the most videos. I usually do lives and I want to give people updates. And I'll throughout this whole next year, I'll be telling people what I'm doing, and I'll do a live every time I go somewhere. Like I'll be going to El Paso again. I'll do another live there, and I'll be informing everybody. So if you want to jump on the journey, follow me, and you'll see me through next March when the primary comes, and hopefully there's not even a runoff. I'll just go to the general election in November.
Awesome, man. And public speaking engagements, do you have any of those coming up?
I do. I will. So that's what I do for a living, right. And I'll be speaking. I'm going to be speaking in Alabama. I'm going to be speaking in Oklahoma, Boston. I have a few lined up. I got to pay the bills.
Yes, sir.
I still got to pay the bills. My wife works. I'm so fortunate with my wife and I. But because I'm retired, that's another thing. You're getting me almost 100% of the time. Yeah. And this is what I'm doing. I'm fully committed to doing this. But in between there, I do my gigs. I do speaking engagements. I do consulting work on the side as well, and get a little bit of money to pay the bills.
And buy the book.
You can go to agentunderfirebook.com. The name of the book is Agent Under Fire: A Murder and a Manifesto. agentunderfirebook.com. It's on Amazon. You could go through there, and I have the links for Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and if you want to go straight to the publisher, you can buy it straight from there as well.
Awesome. Victor, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, brothers. I enjoyed this a lot.
Gary, thank you for coming too, brother.
Anytime, brother. Just let me know. You know that.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Gabe Molina Podcast.